Chapter 101, Force Chamber. Ye Tian stepped up to the tester and struck it with a punch that combined his raw physical power and the flow of Yuanli. "Power of 2 elephants," he barked. Then he activated the Pseudo-Upanishad's level strength amplification. The machine shook, and the whole room trembled as the readout climbed. A single staggering number blinked into view: 60 elephants. It hit 60 elephant power? That's a 30-fold increase. My God! Someone whispered. Ye Tian stared at the display, both surprised and determined. This was only the first part of the experiment. What he really needed to know was whether he could break the old 100x ceiling. Before, every time his attack boost reached 100 kives, it couldn't go higher. If the new pseudo-mystical rank couldn't surpass that limit, the advance would be pointless. After all, a mere 100 kives increase wouldn't be a meaningful leap. He drew the Yuanli knife and slashed at the force meter. "Green wind chop." Pseudo-Upanishad's strength amplification, he announced as he compounded the techniques. The results were simple and brutal. The blade's technique carried its own 6-fold multiplier, and the Pseudo-Upanishad's talent provided a 30-fold boost. One factor multiplied by 6, the other by 30, stacking together against the machine. The two effects combined to multiply his attack power by 180 times. If the limit could really be broken and the full 180 times applied, Ye Tian's strength would climb to 360 elephant power. It all depended on the result. The air detonated around him. The room shook violently. The force measuring device took the brunt of it and flew into the wall. Ye Tian saw a blade-like gouge an inch deep across its casing. Fortunately, the instrument was made of a special memory metal and would slowly repair itself. Otherwise, he'd be out a lot of money. The device wasn't permanently damaged, and a number still glowed on its display. 360 elephants. Ye Tian stood silent for a long moment, too stunned to speak. He felt a rush of exhilaration. Finally, he'd broken the old 100 ties limit. It must be because he had perfected his foundation. By doing so, he'd shattered some rule between heaven and earth and unlocked the 180 ties multiplier. 180 times. What a terrifying increase. Even with only 2 elephant powers, Ye Tianshu could unleash 360 elephant power strikes. A typical master could only muster around 200, and their attacks still wouldn't match his. It wasn't hard to imagine that once he stepped into the sect master realm, his strength would become terrifying. Qingfeng Slash was only a bronze rank sword technique. His sword intent was about to hit the 20% threshold. Once it did, he could begin cultivating a far stronger silver rank sword art and boost his offensive power even more. And his current power talent was only a pseudo-Upanishad grade. If it ever became a true Upanishad-level talent, the thought took his breath away. He knew, though, how unlikely that was. The only way to obtain a genuine Upanishad talent was to encounter a warrior or a fierce beast that already possessed it and copy their essence. Such beings were unimaginably rare. They were beyond his reach for the time being. If he couldn't copy someone else's Upanishads, then his only option was to raise his own Upanishad's talent, but he had no idea how to do that. The Demon Sea Grand Base was unreliable for such things. Very few people even knew what an Upanishad's talent was, much less how to cultivate one. He decided, therefore, to forget about rushing the Sectmaster breakthrough by force. First, he would raise the level of his Upanishad's talent, and only then attempt to impact the Sectmaster realm. Ye Tian had lingered at the threshold of the great martial artist rank long enough. With his foundation now perfectly forged, there was no reason to stay. He rented a Yuanqi cultivation chamber in the tower and prepared to begin his attempt at breaking into the Sectmaster realm. Sitting cross-legged in the quiet room, Ye Tian focused his mind on the purple blood alchemy. Cultivation at the Grandmaster level was different from what he'd practiced as a great martial artist. Advancement now depended less on raw techniques and more on a meticulous refining of the meridians. He drew his attention inward, ready to reshape his channels and temper his qi for the trials ahead. The human body has 8 Qijing meridians. A cultivator's power in the Grandmaster realm depends on these 8 channels. Each meridian refined adds roughly the strength of 10 elephants. When all 8 are opened, you reach the peak of the Grandmaster realm. and with further refinement, the body can be pushed to the Grandmaster limit, roughly the equivalent of 100 elephants of strength. Without a high-level Yuanli forging body secret technique, a practitioner can only use an intermediate Yuanli forging body method, relying on absorbing heaven and earth spirit qi and the blood power of ferocious beasts to laboriously refine each meridian one by one. That process is inevitably slow. The advanced Yuanli forging body secret technique, by contrast, enforces a strict order for tempering the meridians. For example, in the purple blood alchemy system, the first meridian to be opened is the yin dimensional pulse. To successfully temper the body, you must first penetrate the yin dimensional pulse. Only then can the following meridians be refined. That sequence is an essential part of the refinement process. For most top cultivators, breaking through the meridians to reach the Grandmaster realm is straightforward. For those with only advanced cultivation talent, however, the process is far more hazardous. A single mistake can confuse or block the meridians and doom the breakthrough. Ye Tian was a Morning Star talent, a rank above the ordinary extraordinary level, so he had little to fear. Let's begin. He swallowed a mouthful of the finest fierce beast blood, activated the purple blood alchemy technique, and started to open the yin dimensional pulse. A thunderous rumble followed as a surge of force tore through the pulse and cleared the blockage. At the same time, the shackles separating the great martial artist tier from the sect master tier dissolved, and a flood of heaven and earth yuanqi poured into Ye Tian's body, bolstering his strength, speed, defenses, every facet of his cultivation. He underwent a rapid metamorphosis that lasted 3 days. When it was over, Ye Tian had truly reached the Grandmaster level. Ye Tian began to test his physical strength. 1.3. The power of the elephant. That's how he summarized the result. His raw strength was equivalent to 1.3 elephants. It matched the level a sect master would have just after breaking through to that rank. He had already worked out the Morning Star cultivation's rate of progress. In ordinary conditions, the method increased physical strength by 100,000 kilograms per day. Over a month, that was 3,000 kilograms, the power of 3 elephants. And over a year, it came to 36,000 kilograms, or roughly the power of 36 elephants. The Grandmaster limit, by contrast, was the power of 100 elephants, about 100,000 kilograms. At that rate, and from his current standing of roughly 1.3 elephants, Ye Tian calculated he could reach the Grandmaster limit in at most 3 years. By comparison, his research showed most practitioners of extraordinary grade talent needed at least 10 years to reach Grandmaster, and even top-level talents typically took 30 years or more. The speed of his progress, then, was extraordinary and very much in his favor. Ye Tian did the math. His Morning Star talent should be roughly 5 times as effective as an ordinary extraordinary level cultivation talent. Normally, it would take 3 years to advance to the Grandmaster limit. If he also used the Yuan Qi cultivation room occasionally, he could cut that down to around 2 years. That's only 1/5 the time it would take an ordinary extraordinary level cultivator. In other words, roughly 5 times faster. If he publicized those numbers, it would cause a sensation. Spend 2 years at the Grandmaster limit with his Morning Star talent, and Ye Tian could easily break into the king level. That meant he could be a king in 2 or 3 years, and the king level was the highest rank in the Demon Sea Great Base. Once he reached Master, Ye Tian's biggest concern was lifespan. Masters typically live about 200 years, but his blood-eating talent had noticeably strengthened his vitality, roughly 50% stronger than a normal master's. By that estimate, he could expect an extra 100 years, giving him a total lifespan of around 300 years. Ye Tian sat alone in the small courtyard, watching the moon carve a silver arc across the sky. He had been thinking about that number again, 300 years. It wasn't a random quirk of fate. He knew why his life had been stretched so long. It was the result of a perfect foundation laid in his early years. That flawless root, once refined into true mastery, would magnify any physical transformation applied to his body. Longevity, strength, and endurance would all grow exponentially. He had wasted 2 months. The regret still tasted bitter. Those had been 2 precious months in which he had hesitated, preoccupied with petty politics and the endless demands of sect life, rather than putting his copy chances to use. Now that he had finally stepped up to the rank of sect master, there was no more room for delay. The promotion brought not just authority, but an opportunity, the right conditions, the right resources, to exhaust the 2 remaining copy attempts he had left. This time, he wasn't going after a run-of-the-mill talent. He needed something special, something that would best exploit the depth of his foundation and the long span of his life. Ordinary enhancements would improve him, yes, but they wouldn't change the curve of his destiny. He wanted a talent that could awaken dormant potential and carry through centuries, compounding with the benefits of his perfected body. Ye Tian stood and walked to the small shrine in the corner of the courtyard. He placed his hands flat against the carved stone, feeling the residual qi that clung to it like a memory. 2 chances. 2 moves. There were calculations to run, risks to weigh, preparations to make. But the choice had already started forming in his mind, a single, decisive goal that could transform those 300 years from a long life into an unstoppable force. With the moon as his witness, he allowed himself one steadying breath. The next step would be irreversible. He had waited long enough. Chapter 102, Formation Talent. It was a gifted ability tied to the control of arrays, an indispensable art for any large force in the Demon Sea Grand Base. Array mages weren't always the strongest fighters, but their methods of deployment were extraordinarily varied. Killing arrays, defensive arrays, illusion arrays, soundproof arrays, gravity arrays, multi-element arrays. You name it, an array mage could arrange it. Ye Tian wanted to replicate a formation talent. He didn't aim to learn every formation method in full. His goal was practical and narrow. He wanted to set up a private yuan-chi cultivation chamber for himself, so he wouldn't have to rely on the public cultivation tower. That kind of space required an array, and the easiest way to get one was to copy a formation talent. Array mages were not hard to find. They were important figures throughout the Demon Sea Grand Base, and nearly every major faction maintained at least one. The Woog headquarters had its own array mage as well, a high array talent whose name carried weight within the organization. The last time Ye Tian had scoped out an array mage, his eyes had fallen on the talent, but his replication target then was something else entirely, so he had passed up the formation talent. This time, Ye Tian returned to the Woog headquarters with a single purpose. He slipped into the Martial Pavilion and activated his replication talent. The ability spread like a faint ripple, crawling along stone and wood, seeping through screens and doors. Within moments, the entire pavilion was bathed in a subtle, probing aura, an invisible field that sought out and examined the talents and techniques housed there. Ye Tian let the talent sweep the space, narrowing his focus to any signatures that matched a formation talent. It was only a matter of moments before the field lit on a particular contour of energy. There, in a side hall where incense smoke curled lazily from a censer, he found the array mage. The man sat motionless before a low latticework platform, hands folded in simple, precise mudra. Around him, faint lines of runelight traced in the air, small fragments of array patterns that flickered and reformed as the mage practiced. Ye Tian could feel the structure of the formation talent through the replication talent. The basic framework was clear, the intent and initialization sequence recognizable. He had found the mage at last. Name, Ni Chi, cultivation talent, top formation talent, advanced. Ye Tian watched silently, then mimicked the opponent's formation talent. As he copied it, another talent surfaced, a high-level sword talent. A smile flickered across his face. His own sword talent was only high. If he could steal 2 more advanced sword skills, he could break through to top sword talent. He didn't hesitate and copied the advanced sword talent as well. With those 2 new talents, the task he'd come for was complete. Still, he didn't leave. To build a proper cultivation chamber, he needed 2 more things: a primer on array fundamentals and the multi-element array design diagram. To gather the yuan-chi of heaven and earth for a cultivation room, you have to erect a Juan array, and that required not only the poly-element array design, but also the basic formation techniques. Even though he'd copied the formation talent, he he couldn't actually engrave the array pattern or lay out the formation without the manuals. Ye Tian stepped up to a counter and asked, "Do you have the Array Fundamentals manual and the multi-element array design diagrams available?" The waitress smiled. "Honored Grandmaster, we do have basic formation manuals, but we don't carry the blueprint for the Juyuan array method. You'll have to go to the Array Mage Association for that." Array Mage Association, Ye Tian understood immediately. A secret as important as the Juyuan array method diagram wouldn't be sold openly. It would be held by the Array Mage Association. The association had been formed by the Array Mages at the Demon Sea Grand Base. It was their organization and the natural repository for Succup H-guarded designs. So he'd have to become an Array Mage and join the association to get the multi-element array's blueprint. His expression darkened briefly, but he wasn't worried. Joining the Array Mage Association was nothing to him. He already knew it was a loose, non-binding organization. Its members came from many different forces, and there were plenty of independent Array Mages as well. He had no objections to signing up. "All right, then please give me a copy of the basic formation manual," Ye Tian said. The waitress nodded. "Okay, a basic formation manual costs 50 million yuan. Ye Tian paid without hesitation. The waitress quickly sent him a copy of the basic formation manual and handed over the sealed book. He went home and began to study immediately. At first glance, the manual was bewildering. Page after page of cryptic diagrams and strange, interlaced lines that looked more like runes than instructions. He couldn't make sense of any of it. The symbols offered no hint of what they meant or how they were supposed to be used. Then Ye Tian activated his advanced formation talent. Rumble. The room shifted. The black and white diagrams in the book flared to life, dissolving into strands of light and shadow that flowed out of the pages. The world around him seemed to fold inward, revealing a new layer of reality. It was the world of formations. Force, secret, illusion. Names, types, echoed through that space as individual arrays pulsed before him. As each formation unfolded into three-dimensional light, their functions became instantly clear. He could see how a force array shaped energy, how a secret array concealed and bound, how an illusion array bent perception. Understanding came like a switch being flipped. Ye Tian stared at the floating formations and realized the truth. Without formation talent, you couldn't even perceive these patterns, let alone use them. No wonder only those with formation talent could become formation mages. Without the talent, the arrays were just meaningless marks on a page. The realization hit him hard. He immediately began studying inscription formations. Learning how to inscribe arrays required special tools. Inscription pens, the blood of fierce beasts, and paper or other materials imbued with yuan power. Gathering those supplies cost him tens of millions more. The array arts turned out to be an expensive business. Without money, it was almost impossible to get started. The only alternative was to join a powerful faction and be trained as an array mage, but that route meant giving up a great deal of personal freedom. Most array mages either join a sect or slowly save up and learn the craft on their own. Once you get past the initial investment, the work can pay off. Ye Tian didn't care about the cost. He bought vast quantities of materials and practiced formations obsessively. With his talent in the high formation method, his progress was many times faster than that of ordinary array mages. On the first day, he learned 10 formations, the second day 8, and the third day 7. As the formations grew more complex, each one took longer to master. Still, within half a month, Ye Tian had learned 50 formations. 20 was the mark of a junior array mage. 50 made him a true array mage. All he needed now was a proper formation design diagram to lay out full-scale arrays. It's time to go to the Array Mage Association, he decided. Not long after he set out, a grand building rose up before him. A plaque above the entrance bore 5 characters carved in ancient seal script, Array Mage Association. Ye Tian stared. Those weren't simply characters. The strokes were arrangements of smaller arrays, nested and interwoven so cleverly that together they formed the name of the association. You could tell at a glance this inscription wasn't meant as decoration alone. The dense formations in the calligraphy pulsed with latent power, capable of inspiring or testing a person's array aptitude. He stood there, impressed and a little awed by the craftsmanship, and then ped forward toward the entrance. Most ordinary people lack any aptitude for the formation law, so they can't perceive the mysteries behind those 5 great characters. When Ye Tian stepped into the Array Mage Association, a young woman hurried over and bowed slightly. "Your Excellency, may I help you with anything?" She was clearly a staff member of the association. Ye Tian gave her a quick once-over and realized she showed no signs of formation talent. If she did, she wouldn't be working the desk. He checked the association's roster with his copying talent and found there were only about 20 formation mages in the whole place, almost all of them primary or intermediate level. That matched his expectations. True array masters rarely lived at the association itself. They kept private residences or were hosted by major sects. That was why he hadn't tried to copy a formation talent at the association in the first place. He'd already gone to the Martial Pavilion to copy a high formation talent. Now he turned back to the woman and stated his purpose plainly. "I want to take the Array Mage examination." "Ah, does the Grandmaster also have a talent for the formation method?" The girl looked surprised. "Yes." Ye Tian nodded. "Very well, I'll proceed with the Grandmaster examinations." She led him through the registration, completed the paperwork, and paid the assessment fee for him. A notification then appeared in Ye Tian's hand, assessment in 3 days. Chapter 103. 3 days later, Ye Tian returned to the Array Mage Association. He was shown up to the second-floor hall, where an official was calling out the number of candidates. 10 people. Ye Tian looked around. There were 8 young faces, 1 middle-aged man and 1 old man, plus himself, 11 in all. The staff member who had escorted him bowed and left. "Sir, are you an examiner?" a nervous young warrior asked. "No," Ye Tian replied lightly. "I'm here to take the Array Mage exam as well." A well-known examiner glanced his way, his expression a strange mix of awe and disdain. To some of the examiners, Ye Tian's reputation suggested he could become a sect master. His talent was undeniable, yet here he stood registering for the Array Mage test. That, they thought, could only mean his skill with arrays was poor. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to sit this exam at all. Whispers and looks passed around the hall as they sized him up. Array mages were awe-inspiring, and they carried themselves with a quiet pride. Even a junior array mage could make a sect master think twice before crossing them. The group was small but tightly united, and their skills were indispensable to building the Demon Sea Grand Base. For that reason, no one dared offend the Array Mage faction. Their rank brought them real privilege. A junior Array Mage at the Martial rank enjoyed higher standing than an Array Mage apprentice at the Grand Warrior level. Age, meanwhile, was difficult to judge among sect masters. Their lifespans could reach 2 centuries, so a sect master who rose to the rank at 17 or 18 could still look the same a decade later. No one believed Ye Tian was only 17 or 18. They assumed he was closer to 27 or 28. In their world, an Array Mage's aptitude showed itself early. By 15, a person's potential for the craft was usually obvious. If someone reached 27 or 28 without ever becoming an Array Mage, it was taken as proof of poor qualifications. At best, weak formation talent, at worst, nothing of consequence. That was why the few young men had sneered at Ye Tian. They assumed his lack of rank meant he was talentless. Ye Tian, however, felt otherwise. He could detect in them the seed of a junior Array Mage, the kind of talent that would almost certainly mature into the rank with time. A smile curved his lips. How amusing, he thought, that these elite fighters and rising masters would dare look down on one of my masters. He said nothing. Instead, he let a hairline wisp of sword chi spill from him and press outward like a tightening vice. The effect was instantaneous. The nearby youths staggered back as though struck. Their faces went pale, and the bravado that had been on their lips vanished. Those who had mocked him now avoided his eyes. They finally understood how reckless they'd been. Even if they were destined one day to become junior Array Mages, they were not there yet, and they had still dared to insult a Grandmaster. The mistake left them embarrassed and visibly shaken. If the Demon Sea Grand Base actually had lethal power, these candidates would have run into real masters long ago and become corpses. The only other official on duty, a senior examiner, stepped forward and spoke respectfully to Ye Tian. Your Excellency, this man has taken part in many examinations, but he's never faced an adult competitor before. He should be taking the test as an adult for the first time, right? Li Zhang, the old man in question, answered plainly, Yes, this is indeed my first time taking the exam as an adult. Ye Tian nodded and studied him more closely. The talent readout confirmed it. Li Zhang's formation aptitude and other abilities were weak, so weak that he probably had no realistic chance of even qualifying as an array mage. Still, Ye Tian knew better than to judge absolutely. The array mage path was peculiar. If someone possessed even the faintest trace of array talent and underwent certain special procedures, there was a sliver of possibility to be promoted to a junior array mage. The catch was the odds, the difficulty was enormous, and the success rate was under 1%. Li Zhang was old, but he'd still come to take the Formation Mage exam, proof that he had plenty of perseverance. Your Excellency, do you know anything about the exam? Li Zhang asked. I don't, Ye Tian admitted, shaking his head. Then let this old man explain it to the Grandmaster, Li Zhang said. The Formation Mage exam has 3 stages. The first stage is inscription. You must inscribe 20 formations. It's the easiest part. Nearly everyone who shows up can get through it. The second stage is arranging a formation. That's much harder, because the skills for inscribing formations are completely different from those needed to actually set one up. Most candidates fail at that stage. The third stage, well, it's hard to describe simply. You have to find the flaws in a formation. The more flaws you locate, the higher your score. Finding just one flaw is enough to pass, but I've failed the third stage 100 times over. 100 failures? Ye Tian stared in disbelief. Was the third level really that difficult? After all, Li Zhang, who had only limited natural talent, had still managed to inscribe 20 formations and set up a simple array. He'd paid a heavy price to do it, but his perseverance had been extraordinary. Even so, he had failed the third-level test 100 times. Li Zhang didn't pass the examination, yet he was still an impressive formation mage apprentice. He could lay down basic formations well enough to make a living, but he hadn't earned the title of junior array mage. After a while, a man in his 30s arrived to take charge. I am Chen Yao, an intermediate array mage of the Array Mage Association, he announced. I'll be presiding over your examination today. We will begin with the first level. Staff, bring out the inscription pens, the beast blood, and the yuanli paper. An attendant from the association produced the pens, vials of beast blood, and rolls of yuanli paper. With that, the assessment began, the air crackling as the first stage of the exam got underway. Ye Tian picked up the inscription pen, and without needing to copy anything out again, neatly inscribed the 20 formation glyphs. He murmured, "Formation talent," and quietly activated his array aptitude. The patterns on the yuanli paper shimmered, lifting off the sheet as 3-dimensional formations. They unfolded one by one with crystalline clarity, each arrangement's purpose instantly obvious. That confirmed his inscriptions were precise. If they had been flawed, the projected formations would have been garbled or distorted. The other candidates finished their inscriptions shortly after. Chen Yao, an intermediate formation mage and the chief examiner, glanced over the projections and nodded. Good. Everyone passed. Next stage of the exam, formation design blueprints. A girl stepped forward carrying 10 copies of the blueprint and handed them to Chen Yao. He distributed them. These are low-grade soundproofing formations, he explained. They only use the 20 basic arrays. Take a copy and study it. And remember, do not use these designs for personal profit. If you do, the Array Mages Association will never hire you. His tone left no room for misunderstanding. One by one, the attendants passed the formation blueprints around to the assessors gathered in the hall. When the sheet with the sound insulation array fell into Ye Tian's hands, he studied it closely. Ah! Of course. The design struck him as simple and familiar. An array was like building a house. You lay the foundation, erect a 3-dimensional frame, close it into a perfect cyclic space, and once that space was blessed with yuan force, it became a functioning formation. This particular soundproof formation wasn't complex. Ye Tian could read it at a glance. Before he could speak, a young man suddenly piped up. Your Honor, why don't we make this interesting? Let's see who can lay out this soundproof formation first. Ye Tian's gaze flicked over to the speaker. He recognized the challenger, the same fellow who had been put in his place by Ye Tian's sword earlier. A crooked smile tugged at Ye Tian's lips. "Fine," he said. "Want to make it a bet?" Chapter 104, Stakes? Fine. The young man paused a moment, then said, "Betting money is boring. Let's bet on points instead. When you become a junior array mage, the Array Mage Association awards 100 points. Those points can't be bought, only earned by doing association tasks. So they're very valuable. I'm 100% certain I'll become an array mage. I don't know about you, but we can set the bet now. Sound good?" "Yes," Ye Tian said. He wasn't short of money, but he did lack points. He didn't know how many points the multi-element array design schematic would require, but having more couldn't hurt. If this young man was willing to put points on the table, why refuse? Human, Hedong Cultivation Talent, Advanced Formation. Talent, Primary. Ye Tian glanced at the talent readout for the young man. Hedong and sneered, "No matter how long you study formations, you can't make up the difference between a high-level formation talent and a primary one." The second stage of the assessment began. One by one, the attendants handed out the array embryos. Each candidate received a single embryo. Array embryos are made of a special material that can contain linked arrays. Ordinary Yuanli paper can only hold a single array. If you try to connect multiple arrays into a formation on Yuanli paper, the paper will inevitably tear under the strain. In short, anyone attempting to lay a formation in this test must use an array embryo. Begin. Examiner Chen Yao's command rang out, and the trial commenced. Ye Tian picked up his inscription pen, dipped its tip into a drop of fierce beast blood, and began to etch. His advanced formation talent flared to life. With the next stroke, he completed the opening array. Then, building on that foundation, he inscribed formation after formation in rapid succession. Using his superior formation talent, Ye Tian set about constructing a three-dimensional soundproof formation in front of them. He traced each stroke with care. Etch here, etch here. His control of the lines and details far beyond someone with only basic formation training. It wasn't long before he had carved 20 array patterns and stabilized the formation space. Only one step remained. Ye Tian's expression darkened as he poured spiritual force into the three-dimensional array. A low rumble rolled through the air, lights along the formation flared, and the structure snapped into place. The soundproof array was complete. Chen Yao looked at him with surprise and approval, then quickly nodded, motioning for Ye Tian to step aside and cultivate while the others finished their examinations. Ye Tian glanced at Chen Dong and saw him visibly nervous. Chen Dong had only managed to inscribe 12 patterns so far short of Ye Tian's completed 20. "I'm finished. I've lost 100 points. Chen Dong felt panic surge through him. His hand shook, his thoughts scattered, and the rune stroke he just inscribed faltered. The whole array collapsed, the pattern ruined, and the formation invalidated. One failure was allowed in the assessment. A second would disqualify him. An attendant brought out a replacement formation core. This was his last chance. If he failed again, he'd have to wait for the next session, and the registration fee wasn't small. Worse, he would return humiliated in front of everyone. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. "Pass the test first, complain later," someone snapped, and the words snapped him back to focus. Chen Dong forced his breathing steady and composed himself. This time he worked methodically, fingers sure, and movements calm. It didn't take long before the soundproofing array was fully engraved. He'd already failed once, but he wasn't the last to try. The final candidate to inscribe would be Old Man Li Zhang. Li Zhang's talent with formations was painfully poor. He worked slowly and carefully, refusing to rush. He couldn't afford mistakes. His weak aptitude contributed almost nothing to the array. Any misstep could easily ruin the whole deployment. Very good. Everyone passed the con level, and there was no cheating. Now we'll begin the third level, Chen Yao said, nodding with satisfaction. The third level was the most important. This was where they had to find the formation's weaknesses. Chen Yao produced a single object from his sleeve, a fully inscribed formation talisman, the real thing, and activated it. In an instant, a lattice of power rippled outward, and the entire hall was wrapped in the formation. Everyone was trapped inside its field. Ye Tian felt the formation's pattern at a glance. Elementary formation, he thought. It wasn't particularly strong. It was a confinement-type array he could have shattered without much trouble. But this test wasn't about breaking the formation. It was about locating its flaws and exploiting them. This is a small Qingyuan containment array, Chen Yao explained. Because of a mistake during its refinement, the array, though functional, has several flaws. If you can find one of those flaws, I'll certify you as a junior mage. For each additional flaw you uncover, you'll earn another 100 points. But be careful. If you identify a spot that isn't actually a flaw, you'll lose 100 points. Don't be greedy. If you point out both a real flaw and a false one, they cancel out and you score 0. That counts as failing the assessment. You have 30 minutes. When Ye Tian heard that, his heart leapt. He was short on points. One extra flaw would be exactly what he needed. As Chen Yao announced the start, Ye Tian activated his advanced formation talent. In an instant, the array's structure unfolded in his mind like a mapped-out formation space. About 50 individual formations overlapped and shifted within that space. He swept his vision over them one by one, scrutinizing each pattern for the slightest weakness. This pattern doesn't match the array. The inscription is wrong. Mark it down. This one's wrong too. Record it. Here should be a different inscription. He's put the wrong mark. They're nearly identical, only a tiny difference. But because of that, the formation's power drops by at least 10%. Note it. Half an hour later, the assessment ended. Ye Tian smiled. He had found 7 flaws and was certain of each one. Old man Li Zhong, by contrast, wore a dead-faced expression. He hadn't identified a single mistake. Ye Tian caught that look and knew the outcome. Li Zhong had failed, but he also knew why. This test wasn't punishing carelessness so much as measuring innate perception. Someone with weak aptitude couldn't perceive the formation's spatial field clearly. They couldn't even see the array well enough to spot subtle misinscriptions. The third level of the exam was designed precisely to filter for that kind of talent, something the old man hadn't understood, and no one had told him. It didn't matter how many more assessments he took. Without that natural sensitivity, Li Zhong would never pass. In this age, talent decided everything. Old Li Zhong had never been able to develop the natural aptitude for becoming an array mage. No matter how hard he tried, nothing worked, unless he could find some treasure or artifact to boost his talent. Chen Yao folded up the formation and said, "Write down any flaws you found and hand the papers to me." Ye Tian and the others set to work, jotting down the weak points one by one. Even blind old Li Zhong made an effort to write something down. It was a long shot, but any method might help, however slight the chance. When they finished, everyone passed their slips of paper forward. Chen Yao, an intermediate formation mage, collected the notes and began to announce the results. 7 people passed the examination: Ye Tian, Chen Dong, Li Dehai. Chapter 105. 3 of the candidates failed the examination. One was the old man Li Zhong. Another was a middle-aged man whose talent was weak and mediocre. The third was a young man who showed the knack for primary formation but whose foundation was too shaky to pass. Next, announce how many weak points each of the 7 of you found, Chen Yao called. 1 opening, Li Dehai, came the first reply. 2 openings, Zhang Keike, another voice answered. Chen Dong. 4 openings, Chen Yao declared. Chen Dong leapt to his feet, excitement lighting his face. He turned and stared straight at Ye Tian with undisguised defiance. He was no longer afraid of offending him. Now that he had achieved junior array mage rank and become a member of the Array Mage Association, he had standing of his own. What could Ye Tian, a mere sect master, do to lecture him? Besides, Chen Dong had no intention of leaving the Demon Sea Grand Base. If Ye Tian wanted to retaliate, he wouldn't be able to touch him. There was nothing left to intimidate him. Ye Tian, he found 7 loopholes. He's the only assessor who found every one of them. Chen Yao stepped forward and smiled at Ye Tian. You must be very talented. This flawed little Qingyun trap formation was laid by a senior master. Only someone with advanced formation talent could have spotted every loophole during the junior formation mage assessment. Chen Dong's face went pale with disbelief and jealousy. He was only a novice formation talent, better than the average beginner, but nowhere near advanced. The two ranks weren't even comparable. Ye Tian neither denied nor argued. He accepted the praise with quiet modesty. Chen Yao's expression turned businesslike. If you want, you can take the formal talent test. Once your formation talent level is confirmed, the Formation Mage Association will award you an additional 1,000 points. Do you want to take it? She added in a lower voice, the talent test is private. The association never forces anyone to disclose their level. It's all voluntary. The Array Mage Association wouldn't persecute any Array Mage. If Ye Tian refused to undergo the test, they wouldn't force him. But he also wouldn't receive any extra rewards. Master Chen Yao, how many points do the Yuan Gathering Array design diagrams cost? Ye Tian asked abruptly. Chen Yao gave the figures. A Yuan Gathering Array that concentrates Yuan Qi to 3 times normal costs 500 points. The 5 times design is 1,000 points, and the 6 times design is 2,000 points. He hesitated for a moment, then Ye Tian spoke up. 2,000 points for a 6 times array? Ye Tian frowned. Just because an array concentrates Yuan Qi 6-fold doesn't mean it will make cultivation 6 times faster. That would be far too simple. How much cultivation speed improves depends not only on the Yuan Qi concentration, but also on the cultivator's own aptitude and refinement. Ye Tian ran the numbers in his head. If he trained in an environment with 6 times the normal Yuan Qi, then with his Morningstar cultivation aptitude, his refinement speed should increase roughly 3-fold. An extraordinary cultivator would only see a 2-fold boost, and even someone with supreme talent would gain at most a 1.5 times improvement. That meant he had to buy the 6 times Yuan Qi formation diagram. If he went ahead and tested for a formation aptitude, he could earn 1,000 points. Add the 700 points from the assessment and the 100 points won by Chen Dong, and his total would be 1,800, only 200 points shy of 2,000. He nodded to himself. All right, I'll take the test. Excellent. Test for the formation aptitude, then, Chen Yao said, his voice bright with excitement. If he could bring a high-level formation talent onto his team and have it confirmed, the extra points would make a big difference in the main examination score. That was why he was so eager. Mage Chen Yao, the testing orb won't scan for other talents, will it? Ye Tian asked quickly, not wanting to reveal anything he shouldn't. Of course not, Chen Yao replied, at once. The Formation Mages Association wouldn't invade someone's privacy like that. The orb only measures formation talent. That's a relief, Ye Tian said. Chen Yao activated the testing orb and began the examination of Ye Tian's formation aptitude. The test finished almost immediately. As I thought, you have a high-level formation talent. Congratulations. The Formation Mages Association has credited you with an extra 1,000 points. Chen Yao announced, a touch of envy in his voice. Even he knew how rare it was to be awarded 1,000 points at once. Anyone would be jealous to see it happen so easily. A short while later, Chen Yao issued Ye Tian's mage badge and the 7 scoring cards. The association's points were loaded onto the cards. Each card was identity-bound, usable only by its owner. Even if someone else got hold of it, they couldn't use it. Ye Tian turned to Chen Dong and, half-joking, half-pleading, said, Chen Dong, give me 100 points. Chen Dong didn't dare to cross Ye Tian. If Ye Tian were only a sect master, Chen Dong might have been able to stand up to him, but Ye Tian was a high-array mage, a grandmaster-level talent who was only going to get stronger. Offend him now and Chen Dong's future would be ruined. Master Ye Tian, I'm sorry. I was wrong. 100 points, I'll give them to you right now. Chen Dong blurted, without a trace of embarrassment. Who would keep their pride in front of a Grandmaster-class array mage? If anything, he felt a strange pride. He'd once pressured a high-ranking formation master, and that memory made him less worried about a little humiliation now. Hand them over. Ye Tian's voice was flat and final. Chen Dong did as told and passed the 100 points across. Ye Tian barely glanced at him afterward. Dealing with such an insignificant pest was a waste of time. He turned his attention back to the mission hall board on the first floor of the Array Mage Association, scanning for tasks he could finish quickly to net another 200 points. Suddenly, heavy footsteps thundered through the hall. Boom, boom, breaking the quiet. Tasks scrolled past in rapid succession. Ye Tian read each one, but most weren't for him. Some took too long, others demanded a formation mage of a very high caliber. Then one listing made him stop. Shanghai Array Tower Task. Entry into the Shanghai Array Tower. Issued once per year. Requirements: Grandmaster rank, advanced formation talent, primary formation or higher. All 3 conditions are mandatory. Reward: points awarded according to the record of successful completion. Ye Tian's heart skipped. The qualifications were brutally strict. He didn't have any way to prepare for something like that. But the posting time told him the real story. It had been released decades ago and was still sitting there, unclaimed. "I'm going to take the Shanghai Array Tower task," he said to himself with a steady look. He walked up to the task counter and announced it. The attendant stood, smiling politely. "Please present your ID card," the staff member said. After all, only top-tier array talents could be entrusted with the Shanghai Formation Tower. Those qualified inevitably became high-level array mages, respected to the point that even king-rank figures treated them with deference. Ye Tian handed his identification to the attendant. They checked it and immediately recognized his credentials. Once the assignment was confirmed, Ye Tian was given a dossier on the Shanghai Formation Tower. Chapter 106, a dossier opened, detailing the Shanghai Array Tower. The tower had been established by the King of Shanghai, a once famous figure at the Demon Sea Grand Base. He was not only a king-level powerhouse, but also a top formation master, one of the highest authorities in the Demon Sea Grand Base, and one of the architects of the base's defensive array. After a terrible accident in which he was grievously wounded, he returned to the Demon Sea Grand Base, hastily erected the array tower, and left behind his legacy and inheritance. Anyone with exceptional talent in the Shanghai formation art may attempt the tower. Clearing each floor awards a formation blueprint, and anyone who reaches the 9th floor can claim the title of successor to the King of Shanghai. Yet, no one had ever become his successor. For reasons unknown, many high-level formation prodigies abandoned the trial after clearing the 8th floor. There were dozens of schematic drawings for the Shanghai Formation Tower, each one a potential windfall for anyone clever enough to decipher it. Breaking into the tower could yield enormous rewards, but the risks were equally great. Most of the defenses were lethal arrays. Only a master-level practitioner could attempt the task without being shredded by the tower's traps. Even powerful warriors had been known to fall victim to the place. Knowing all that, Ye Tian still made his way to the Shanghai Formation Tower. "This is it," he murmured as he reached the old city that surrounded the tower. It had been the first settlement in the region. Now it sat on the rim of the Demon Sea base. Few people lived here anymore, and those who remained were mostly elderly warriors who had chosen the quiet. The tower itself loomed at the center, its reputation well known. The Array Mage Association maintained tight control over the Shanghai Tower. Soldiers were posted around the clock, and ordinary citizens were not permitted within its perimeter. Ye Tian produced his mission pass and identification to the guards. They scanned his papers, exchanged a few curt words, and opened the way. Inside, the air felt colder. Ye Tian stepped into the tower's first formation layer. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the structure answered him. Rumble! The sky and earth convulsed as sheets of flame erupted, turning the area into a burning world. "Flame attack formation," Ye Tian muttered, a hint of excitement in his voice. He studied the blaze carefully. The formation's attack power was terrifying, powerful enough that a great warrior caught in it would have little chance of survival. Only a handful of specially trained martial artists might barely make it through. Ye Tian wanted to see how far his own strength could go against it. He activated his technique. Pseudo-Upanishad's power talent. Green Wind Chop. He poured everything into the strike and sent it crashing into the formation. The blow landed, but an invisible force instantly diverted it aside. As he had suspected, there was no way to take advantage of an opening here. Unless his power reached the king level of the Shanghai King, he couldn't break the formation. Any attack would simply be absorbed or redirected by the formation's mysterious force. Ye Tian's brow tightened. There were two options: try to brute force the formation, or manipulate the formation itself. He chose the latter and opened his advanced formation talent. In a flash, the flame-filled space folded into a formation space. and a lattice of array lines sprang up before him. The formations merged, spitting out a barrage of flame. Watching the pattern of the array, Ye Tian's solution slowly came into focus. Break the formation nodes, he decided. Calling on his advanced array talent, he searched carefully and located a node, the connection point between segments of the array. Concentrating his force into a single finger, he struck it. The node ruptured, and the flames flickered as the array shifted. One after another he found and smashed the nodes. After he destroyed more than 10, the entire array fractured and collapsed into pieces. The first layer of the formation was gone. A rift opened in the void, and a diagram floated into Ye Tian's hand. Elementary Defense Formation Design, Rain Curtain. He tucked the basic formation diagram away and immediately set about dismantling the second layer. The second layer proved far more difficult, a cold ice formation. It took Ye Tian several hours of struggle to break it. Luckily, his cultivation was strong enough to let him remain in the formation space for so long. An ordinary sect master would likely have been frozen by the formation's attacks before they could dismantle it. The third layer was even worse, the Aoki formation, a wood element offensive array. It took him nearly a full day to dispel it. By the time he succeeded, his Yuan Qi was almost exhausted and his body was thoroughly drained. Defeated by fatigue, Ye Tian had no choice but to stop the examination there. He did, however, gain 3 design scrolls from the pagoda, a primary defensive array blueprint called Rain Curtain, a primary fire array design named Fire Dragon Soaring into the Sky, and a hidden array schematic labeled Stealth. Not a bad haul. He only wished he knew how many reward points the association would grant for them. After a night of rest, Ye Tian left the Shanghai Array Pagoda and went to the Array Mage Association the next day. I'll turn the mission in. Ye Tian stepped up to the mission desk and presented the Shanghai Array Tower assignment. The attendant took his identification card, verified it, and nodded. The report from the Shanghai Array Tower has already come through. You did complete the task and you cleared the 3rd tier. We'll award you 900 points. The breakdown is, 1st tier 100 points, 2nd tier 200 points, 3rd tier 400 points. The attendant paused, then added, Note, you can accept this task again next year, but if you don't manage to break through to the 4th tier, then you won't receive a reward. Understood. Ye Tian bowed once, and the attendant credited his account with 900 points. Then the attendant asked, Array Mage Ye Tian, you should have brought 3 array design diagrams from the Shanghai Array Tower. If any of those diagrams aren't already in the Array Mage Association's archive, you can trade them in for additional points. Do you want to exchange them? Yes. Ye Tian produced 3 design drawings and handed them over. Ye Tian frowned. There was only one unique secret formation scroll available in the exchange right now. The so-called Hidden Breath design wasn't listed at the Array Mage Association, and the other 2 scrolls he knew about were already in the association's collection, and therefore not tradable. Still, he was able to trade one of his own designs and received 500 points for it, a windfall that sent his balance climbing. He did the math carefully. With the 500 points added, he now had 3,300 points total, more than enough to buy the 6-fold Yuan Gathering Array design scroll. That particular blueprint concentrates Yuan Qi 6 times more effectively than normal. Ordinarily, a basic, primary, array scroll is worth only a few dozen points. The 500-point payout had been unusually generous only because the association lacked that specific primary design in its archives. By contrast, the 6-fold Yuan Gathering Array is an intermediate formation whose power rivals many advanced arrays, which is why the association priced its design scroll so steeply at 2,000 points. Ye Tian didn't hesitate. He bought the design for a poly-Yuan array method capable of concentrating 6 times the usual vital energy and spent 1,000 points on several high-grade array embryos. Better to use the points than let them go to waste. With the embryos purchased and everything else nearly in place, the next step was to learn the formation technique and quickly reach the level required to set the Juyuan array. Once he mastered the Juyuan array law and completed the formation, he could arrange it. And within a year, he would be able to advance to ultimate. Secmaster, Chapter 107, Home. Ye Tian studied the design of the Juyuan array method carefully. Only then did he understand the full requirements. To lay out the Juyuan array properly, he needed to master 100 formations, and crucially, he needed Yuanqi stones to activate it. The most basic Juyuan array doesn't require a Yuanqi stone, he murmured. But the qi it draws in that way is only marginally stronger than the surrounding world. Only the intermediate gathering Juyuan array can rapidly condense heaven and earth Yuanqi, and that one needs a Yuanqi stone to function. No wonder the villa never used the intermediate array. Without Yuanqi stones, it couldn't be started. Ordinary people had no way to obtain those stones, so even if they had the formation written down, they couldn't activate it. Then Ye Tian smiled. He wasn't short on Yuanqi stones, far from it. In the secret realm, he dug up more than 2,000 of them. Each stone could be used for a month and a day. 2,000 stones would last for many years. With that supply, he certainly had no shortage of Yuanqi stones. The next goals were to cultivate the purple blood alchemy technique, grasp the true meaning of the sword, and study the formation of enlightenment. The regimen was demanding, but Ye Tian enjoyed it. Half a month passed in a flash. His progress in cultivation hadn't been dramatic. He hadn't spent much time on pure cultivation, focusing more on the purple blood alchemy, but there were still clear gains. His physical strength had increased to the equivalent of 2 elephants, and his sword intent had finally advanced into the second-level sword intent realm, making it possible, in theory, to practice a silver-tier sword technique. There wasn't a silver-tier technique available to him yet, so that plan had to be set aside for the time being. As for formations, Ye Tian had now inscribed 71 formations, enough to be considered a competent primary-level array mage. If he could reach 80 formations and master a few intermediate formations, he would become an intermediate array mage. But engraving 100 formations would take at least 2 or 3 months, and he didn't have the luxury of waiting that long. You must replicate the high formation talent again, Ye Tian decided. Top-level formation talent was extremely rare, but high-level formation talent appeared with some frequency. His copying ability's cooldown had just ended, giving him 2 more chances to duplicate. This time, he planned to copy 2 high-level formation talents and fuse them, hoping to elevate his own formation talent to top tier. If he succeeded, he could inscribe 100 formations in a short time and lay down the Juyuan formation at will. Even if he left the Demon Sea Grand Base in the future, he would still be able to deploy the Juyuan array whenever necessary, a huge convenience for his cultivation. That afternoon, Ye Tian raced across the main strongholds, checking them one by one. After a careful search, he found traces of 2 high-level array mages, one in Hellion's residence and another at the Demon Sea Bank headquarters. He copied the advanced formation talents from both of them. Then he returned home and began the fusion. He concentrated, drew the copied formation patterns into his mind, and worked to meld them together. Half an hour passed. Ye Tian, still a little tired, smiled as he glanced at the retinal display. Formation talent. Top formation talent, he murmured. I should be able to inscribe 100 formations in a month. Then I can set up the Juyuan array method. No more wasted time. With that in mind, he doubled down on formation work. He shortened his sessions with the purple blood alchemy technique and set the sword intent aside for the time being, pouring everything into engraving. Thanks to his top-grade talent, after 26 days he had completed 100 formations. Everything was in place. No more delays. Ye Tian prepared to take out a high-level array embryo and begin inscribing the intermediate multi-element array. He had only Sang qualified to attempt the intermediate Juyuan array method, and the technique itself was notoriously difficult. Even with his top-tier formation talent enhancement effect boosting him, Ye Tian couldn't promise himself 100% success. Go. He steadied his breath and began inscribing. The first array went in cleanly, then the second, third, fourth. He worked with steady precision until the 42nd pattern. A hairline mistake ruined the inscription. The array seed collapsed, and the matrix had to be discarded. He remade a new seed and tried again. The same thing happened 2 more times. Only on the 4th attempt did the 42nd array finally lock into place. When the formation was complete, Ye Tian set the array disk into the floor of the cultivation chamber and placed a yuan qi stone in its center. He activated the Juan array method. A low rumble ran through the room as endless streams of heaven and earth yuan qi flowed into the formation, and the qi inside the array space began to thicken. After about half an hour, the yuan qi density in the chamber had swelled to more than 6 times that of the outside world. The air is so full of life, breathing feels effortless. Ye Tian grinned, thoroughly pleased with the effect of the Juyuan array. With the array amplifying the world's vitality, he could cultivate without interruption. Between his morning star cultivation instinct, the advanced Yuanli forging body secret technique, purple blood alchemy, and the Juyuan array method, his rate of progress was astonishing. If anyone else saw it, they'd call him a demon. After a day of cultivation, he murmured to himself, "At this speed, I can gain 9 power levels in a month." He did the quick math. 9 levels a month would be 90 in 10 months. Even factoring in a slowdown later, a year should be enough to push him to the sect master's ultimate. A few days later, Ye Tian gained 2 more opportunities to copy talents. He hesitated. There were so many options. What should he take? Then he remembered. He still hadn't copied most of the abilities belonging to that little one from before. Little Blood. The name came to him. Little Blood was the name he had given the War Blood Heavenly Dragon. He hadn't used his copying chances on its talents yet. Ye Tian glanced over and saw Xiao Blood playing with Xiao Jin, so he didn't interrupt them. He hesitated for a moment, then fixed his attention on the 2 talents displayed above Xiao Blood. Flying Talent, Advanced Blood and Bone Talent, Medium. He'd wanted the flying talent for a long time, but it wasn't strictly necessary right away. He wasn't planning to leave the Demon Sea Grand Base yet, so a travel-oriented ability wasn't urgently useful. Still, the chance to take an advanced talent was tempting. He shut his eyes and concentrated. Copy, converge. It didn't take long. The flying talent folded into him, and Ye Tian tried it at once. Without calling on any external power, he felt a lightness under his feet and rose, floating up as if the floor had vanished. He drifted to one corner of the room, then another, steering effortlessly with the new talent. After a short rest, Ye Tian turned his attention to the Blood and Bone talent. From the brief demonstrations Xiao Blood had already shown, he had a clear idea of what that talent entailed, so he began the copying process. The Blood and Bone talent is a rare and unusual ability. It allows its user to select a single bone in their body and refine it with their blood, gradually forging that bone into a weapon, a blood and bone armament that can be drawn from the body at will and returned just as easily. At more advanced stages of refinement, the blood and bone substance can be reshaped into any weapon form, even a blade. When the blood and bone is finally separated from the original bone, the body doesn't suffer long-term damage. A new bone will regenerate in its place, and the blood and bone weapon remains attached to that new structure without affecting the host. The drawback is that this talent is only a D-level aptitude. At its peak, it can only be condensed into a high-level Yuanbing weapon, and once its user reaches the king level, the talent's usefulness declines significantly. Still, it's better than nothing, and if the talent can be improved further in the future, it would become formidable. Chapter 108. Ye Tian had planned to push his cultivation all the way to Sect Master level before leaving the Demon Sea Grand Base. But after a little over 20 days of training, his progress was slower than he'd hoped. His physical strength had only reached what one could call the power of 10 elephants. He was still far from his goal. Then a short message arrived from Yue Ling that yanked him out of his routine. Something's happened at the coastal base? Ye Tian's brow tightened. Yue Ling was a reliable source. If she said something had happened, he took it seriously. The Linhai base wasn't just any outpost. It was his hometown, the place where his sister Ye Yu lived and where his villa still stood. Moving to the Demon Sea base hadn't erased that connection. He hadn't sold the villa for a reason. He intended to go back someday. The message had been too brief to be useful, so Ye Tian reached out immediately, hoping to hear the details from Yue Ling herself. An hour later, she appeared, and he wasted no time. "Yue Ling," he asked, face hard with worry, "what happened at the Linhai base?" Yue Ling's expression turned serious. A beast tide is about to erupt, she said quietly. Linhai Base is within the danger zone. Under normal circumstances, the Demon Sea Grand Base wouldn't stand by and let Linhai fall. Linhai is too important. It's the gateway to the Demon Sea Grand Base. But this time, the situation is different. The tide is sweeping through several major bases. The Grand Base is stretched thin and can't spare forces for a small coastal outpost like Linhai. She leaned closer. Right now, this information is only being shared among the core members of the Demon Sea Grand Base's main families. I only know because I just broke through to Grandmaster, and my status in the Yuo family has risen. You mustn't tell anyone else. If this gets out, it'll cause chaos. I have a bad feeling about this one. It may be even worse than the beast tide 40 years ago. Ye Tian's pupils narrowed. Hearing Yueling, he suddenly understood why the Demon Sea Grand Base couldn't come to Linhai's aid. The Grand Base itself was facing a crisis. If the tide was hitting several large bases, they couldn't possibly spare the manpower or resources to defend a distant coastal outpost. With this wave of beasts, the coastal base could only depend on itself. How likely do you think Linhai Base is to be destroyed? Ye Tian asked. Almost 100%. Yueling sighed. You don't understand, Ye Tian. The Yuo family knows more about this than most. Don't be fooled by how secure a big base looks. Any one of them can fall at any time. Over the past 100 years, countless bases have already been wiped out. The situation for humanity is getting worse and worse. The rifts in space are still widening. As time goes on, more and more powerful beasts will come through. It's not impossible that one day even humans could be wiped out. A heavy silence hung between them. Ye Tian drew a long breath. I'm planning to go to the coastal base, he said quietly. Please look after my sister for me. Promise me you'll keep her safe. It's no hardship for me to look after your sister, Yueling replied, but her voice snapped with fear. But you're going to the coastal base? Do you want to get yourself killed? The Demon Sea Grand Base was on the brink of collapse, but there was still a real chance to save it. Asking the super base for help, however, wasn't an option, even though the two were linked. The problem was Linhai Base. It had no defensive formation. If a beast tide hit Linhai, the surge could overrun the whole base in an instant. Even king-rank defenders would struggle to hold back such an onslaught. What about Ye Tiankai? Someone asked anxiously. He's only at Grandmaster level. One master can't stop a beast tide. At best a small pack, maybe. Not a whole flood of them. Yueling urged caution. Ye Tian, this is too dangerous. Don't risk yourself for it. It isn't worth it. Ye Tian smiled faintly. I'm not foolish, he said. I'll try to why them. If I can't stop them, I'll pull out. He sounded calm, almost casual. And if I need to retreat, there aren't many beasts that can catch me. He wasn't boasting. With his current cultivation, combined with an extraordinary speed aptitude and superior flying talent, Ye Tian moved far faster than many king-ranked opponents. If things went south, he could simply fly away. His high-flight talent could multiply his speed tenfold. It wasn't the absolute top speed, but in the open air, where there were no obstacles, he could move at full strength. Even the fastest flying beasts couldn't catch him. With talents like that, Ye Tian was one of the hardest fighters in the world to kill. It was because of those advantages that he felt confident enough to go to the coastal base. Without them, he wouldn't be so reckless. Yueling knew she couldn't change his mind, so she only warned, Ye Tian, be careful. If it gets out of hand, come back immediately. Ye Tian nodded and broke away from her. Before leaving, he spoke a few things to Ye Yu, but he didn't mention the real danger at the coastal base or the tide of beasts. Telling him would only cause needless worry. Then he nudged the sleeping blood-heavenly dragon with his foot. Little Blood, he said, smiling, come on, I'll take you somewhere. Don't you always complain you don't get enough to eat? This time I'll let you eat as much as you want. How's that? Really? The battle blood heavenly dragon's eyes snapped open at Ye Tian's words. It lifted its massive head and, sounding almost breathless with excitement, asked, It's true? We're really going? Yeah, let's go, Ye Tian urged. The dragon's long tail thumped the ground once in eager agreement, and it fell in behind him. They walked through the settlement without causing much of a stir. Humans of this era had never seen a dragon, and this one didn't match the elegant serpentine creatures from stories anyway. Its body was thick and powerfully built rather than slender. To the townsfolk, it probably looked like some kind of strange dragon beast. What made discovery even less likely was that Xiao blood had completely fused with Long Wei. Its presence was hidden inside the human host, not prowling openly as a mythical worm. Soon they left the Demon Sea Grand Base and reached the open scrubland beyond. "Xiao blood," Ye Tian said, "fly with me. We're heading for the coastal base." "Fly," Little Blood blurted out. It had never had the chance to take to the air at the Grand Base and had long assumed it was a land creature. The idea of flying felt foreign and impossible, yet something in it fluttered at the thought. Ye Tian glared at Little Blood for a long moment. He wanted to shake the little dragon. After all, it had a high-flying talent and yet kept claiming it couldn't fly. "You have innate flying talent. You can fly. Try it," he snapped. "If you don't, there won't be any beast blood for you this time." The threat about losing the beast blood snapped something into Little Blood. Panic flashed across its face, then determination. After only a few seconds of concentrating on its aerial talent, it surged upward, instinctively finding balance in the air and quickly grasping how to fly. I'm a flying dragon!" Little Blood cried, thrilled. In a blink of light, it appeared beside Ye Tian, lowered its head and said eagerly, "Master, climb on my back. Little Blood will take you flying." Ye Tian sprang up onto its back, settled cross-legged, and pointed toward the coast. "Take off. Let's go to the coastal base." Chapter 109. At the seaside base, life went on as usual. Warriors still rode out into the wild to hunt beasts, and ordinary villagers and laborers worked their fields and docks, completely unaware that a tide of monsters was approaching. The Demon Sea Base had clearly cut ties with Linhai Base. It had abandoned the area and made no effort to warn anyone there. What had caught the attention of the coastal commanders was not the monster tide itself, but something stranger. People from Wugi and staff from the bank were quietly evacuating. That furtive movement raised alarms, and a meeting was called. Grandmaster Li and several senior warriors gathered at the Lin family estate. The Lin family was the nominal administrator of the region, so it was only natural that the council assembled there. But this time, the meeting was not presided over by Lin Wanli. Only Grandmaster Li, Old Man Li, had the authority to convene and lead this particular gathering. Old Man Li cleared his throat. "Everyone here should already know this. Nearly all the senior members of Wu Gei in the black market have quietly withdrawn. Master Wu Zhong has vanished. What remains of Wu Gei are only a few fighters and martial artists who originally came from our Linhai base. The same is true of the bank. The top leadership is almost entirely gone. Investigators say they've all gone back to the Demon Sea Grand Base." "Back to the Demon Sea Base?" Several of the senior fighters frowned. "Is something wrong at the Demon Sea Base?" one of them asked. Old Man Li shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe something happened there, but honestly, it feels more likely that something is about to happen to our Linhai base." "What? Something's going to happen to Linhai?" A veteran who had once belonged to the Iron Tooth base cried out. He'd only recently lived through the collapse of Iron Tooth. Could Linhai be next? Old Man Li rubbed his chin, thinking aloud. "Look at it this way. If something serious had happened at the Demon Sea base, why would the bank people, or even Wugi, come back here? They're low-ranking, they live comfortably at the sea base, and yet they're all gone. They're clearly desperate to leave our coastal base and won't stay. I can't imagine any reason for that except that the coastal base has become dangerous." Lin Wanli frowned. "Can you get through to the Demon Sea Grand Base? We need to find out what's going on." "Can't be reached." Old Man Li shook his head. "All the radios that could pick up a signal have been taken. The contact device we bought only works inside Linhai Base. It can't reach anyone at the Demon Sea Grand Base." "Could the same beasts that wiped out Iron Tooth Base be heading for the sea base?" one of the senior warriors guessed. "Their leader was a king-class beast, the weakest kind of king, but a single breath would kill us. If that thing attacked, the coastal base couldn't stop it. That's why Wugi and the bank pulled back." "Unlikely," Old Man Li said. "I sent scouts," he went on. "That group of beasts hasn't made any move. They shouldn't have run toward Linhai Base. Besides, even if the king beast did attack, it's the weakest sort, and was forcibly promoted by some special method. Its true combat capability is only equivalent to a half-step king beast. They had the strength and resilience of a king-class beast, but not its speed. There were only a handful of king-level fighters stationed at the Demon Sea Grand Base. Sending even one of them out would be enough to wipe out that pack of feral beasts. "What's going on?" several senior warriors demanded, panic edging their voices. One of them spoke aloud the thought on everyone's minds. "Should we retreat to the Demon Sea Base and hide?" "No," Lin Wanli answered first and firmly. "Most of us have families. How can we just abandon them? Besides, how could they be sure the Demon Sea Grand Base itself was safe? If there were a battle underway there, fleeing toward it would be suicide." Many of the senior fighters nodded in agreement. Old Man Li shot a warning look at the men who had suggested running for the base. At that moment, an elite warrior barreled into the hall, breathless. "Grandmaster, great martial artists, something's wrong. An incomparably terrible beast has entered the base." A fresh wave of alarm swept through the room. Old Man Li demanded, "What kind of beast? Tell me exactly what's happening." The other great warriors turned to the elite fighter, their faces asking the same question. "What happened?" "Sir, a flying beast about 10 meters long just came into the base," the elite fighter reported. "It moved so fast, nobody had time to react. It landed in the Central Garden area." "Central Garden community?" someone echoed. That neighborhood used to be just another villa development. After Ye Tian's rise, though, prices there had shot up, and they'd fallen again when he left. "Let's go, check it out!" Old Man Li barked, and the other great warriors fell in behind him. They reached the Central Garden quickly. Someone was already running toward them, breathless. "Everyone! Master Ye Tian has returned!" A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. Ye Tian had been away at the Demon Sea Grand Base for a long time. Many hoped he knew the inside story of recent events. If anyone could explain why Wu Gei and the bank had pulled out, it would be him. Old Man Li felt conflicted. He was relieved that the strange occurrences at the coastal base might finally have an explanation, but he resented the fact that he no longer had free rein. He would now have to defer to Ye Tian and follow his orders. Still, duty won out. "Come with me. We'll go see Master Ye Tian," he said. A number of senior martial artists, led by the sect master, marched to Ye Tian Villa, creating a huge stir in the Central Garden. Word of Ye Tian's return spread through Linhai Base like wildfire. Countless people heard the news. Despite the commotion, most remained oddly unmoved. Ye Tian's reputation and cultivation put him on a completely different plane, and for ordinary people, there was little use in getting worked up about it. At the villa, Ye Tian was busy tidying up. He'd be living there for the foreseeable future. Xiao Blood paced the rooms with obvious displeasure. "Master, this dump is worse than our old place. Why do we have to live here?" he complained. "This used to be my home," Ye Tian said, glancing at him. Xiao Blood quickly changed his tone. "Master, this place feels very classical. It would be an excellent place to live. Your reflexes are sharp and your will to survive is strong. You're developing very quickly," Ye Tian said calmly outwardly, though inwardly he was astonished. He remembered when Xiao Blood had first come into being. It could only utter a few basic words like hungry, thirsty, or sleep. In such a short time, it had not only grown to 10 meters long, but also shown an intelligence comparable to a human teenager. That kind of growth and aptitude was shocking. Truly worthy of a Shi-Ri-level bloodline talent, he thought, his expression darkening. Chapter 110. Ye Tian's spirit power picked up movement outside the villa. A group of people were approaching. They were senior members of the coastal base calling out, "We're here to see Master Ye." Old Man Li and the great martial artists had stopped at Ye Tian's gate and bowed deeply. "Come in," Ye Tian's voice answered, and they stepped inside. When they saw Ye Tian and the battle-blood heavenly dragon beside him, the visitors froze. Although the dragon seemed restrained, its aura and cultivation could not be hidden. It was clearly a top-tier beast. Old Man Li stared at the dragon and trembled. He felt it could kill him in an instant. It was, without question, an utterly terrifying apex beast. He turned to look at Ye Tian, horror on his face. "Grandmaster!" Ye Tian's cultivation had risen to the rank of Grandmaster, far beyond that of a great martial artist. Old Man Li wasn't the only one stunned. All the other great martial artists stood silent and shocked. They had called Ye Tian a grandmaster before because, though his official cultivation was only that of a great martial artist, his combat ability already outstripped ordinary sect masters. Now, however, Ye Tian had actually broken into the sect master realm. If a great martial artist could kill a sect master, then a true sect master like Ye Tian made the same deed seem like killing a chicken, effortless and terrifying. The crowd pressed in closer, their fear deepened. No one dared to relax for even a moment. "Master Ye, why have you returned?" Old Man Li asked. He dropped into a humble posture, but the old domineering power of a veteran grandmaster still hummed beneath his composure, a quiet pressure that reminded everyone he was not to be trifled with. "There's going to be a crisis at the coastal base," Ye Tian said plainly. "That's why I came back." He did not hide it. The coastal base had a right to know, and Ye Tian also hoped that Old Man Li and the others could lend their aid. The word spread like wildfire. "Coastal base! Crisis!" someone cried, and the murmur swelled into open alarm. Old Man Li's face paled. For the first time since Ye Tian arrived, the old man looked truly unsettled. He had suspected this might be the case when he called the meeting, but he'd still clung to a sliver of hope. Now that Ye Tiandu had returned from the Demon Sea Grand Base and personally confirmed that Linhai Base was in crisis, there was no longer any doubt. "Master Ye, please save the Linhai Base," Lin Wanli begged. The other senior warriors and Old Man Li crowded around him, all pleading the same thing. Ye Tiandu let out a long sigh. "I came back for this," he said, "but let me make one thing clear. If I weren't strong enough, I wouldn't still be here at the coastal base. I'd have fled long ago. Be ready to run at a moment's notice. Whether you get away or not will come down to luck." Old Man Li's expression went pale. "Master Ye," he said, voice tight, "is it true the king-class beast that wiped out Iron Tooth Base is going to attack Linhai Base next?" "No," Ye Tian said, shaking his head. "If this were only the work of a king-class beast, the Demon Sea Grand Base would never ignore Linhai. Linhai is a gateway outpost of the Demon Sea Grand Base. Normally they'd be able to send reinforcements, but they can't help now, because the Demon Sea Grand Base itself is facing a crisis of annihilation." Thunder seemed to roll through the room. The news stunned Old Man Li and the others into silence. The Demon Sea Grand Base was enormous, home to countless masters and many king-level warriors. How could such a tremendous stronghold be threatened with annihilation? The notion was so impossible they could hardly let themselves think it through. "Will our coastal base suffer the same fate?" Lin Wanli asked, voice hoarse with fear. "Yes." Ye Tian's voice was grave. "I don't know the exact details, only that an unprecedented wave of beasts is about to break loose. The Demon Sea Grand Base and several other major bases lie squarely in the strike zone. Smaller bases, like Linhai, are only on the edge of the impact, but even a glancing blow is more than a small base can handle. In those circumstances, the Demon Sea Grand Base will be fighting for its own survival. There won't be any spare forces to send out." "I see." Lin Wanli finally understood why the people from Wuj and the bank had fled. From their perspective, although the Demon Sea Base is also at risk, it stood a far better chance of holding than Linhai. If things went badly, Linhai would almost certainly be wiped out. "Master Ye," he said, voice tight, "can we call the Demon Sea Grand Base for help now?" "No way," Ye Tianyi said flatly, cutting off Lin Wanli's suggestion. "The vast majority of people in the Demon Sea Grand Base don't even know about the beast tide," he explained. "They kept it secret to avoid mass panic. Only the core members of the great powers were told. If you try to relocate the base, you'll inevitably make that knowledge public. Do you really think those big factions won't send assassins after you once word gets out?" A ripple of color drained from the assembled faces as the idea was dismissed. "Master Ye, what do we do now?" Old Man Li asked. He was a master and still expected to live another 100 years or more. He wasn't eager to throw that away. "Set up the formations," Ye replied. "By my estimate, the beast tide will last at least a few days. We have time. Over the next few days, I'll arrange additional defensive formations. They won't be perfect, but they should buy us some protection." "Formations? Master Ye, you can still work arrays?" Old Man Li's surprise was obvious. He'd been to the Demon Sea Grand Base before and knew how highly an array mage was regarded there. Good value for money, Ye Tian said with a nod. Master Ye, do you need any help? Someone asked. Old Man Li looked up at Ye Tian. Yes, help me collect a batch of formation embryos. The design itself isn't complicated, but the material requirements are very demanding. They need yuan energy materials so they can hold and channel the formation. Once molded into array cores, the blacksmith at the coastal base can forge them. Get as many as you can. All right, Ye Tian replied and set his people to work. Everyone scattered to gather the formation embryos while Ye Tian began refining the formations. Most of what he worked on were defensive and offensive arrays. He had brought a fair number of array cores with him, but it still wasn't nearly enough, so he asked Old Man Li and the others to help source more. He set to engraving without pause. One formation after another was etched onto the cores, and because of his extraordinary aptitude for formations, the work went quickly. He could inscribe a primary formation in under 10 minutes, and an intermediate formation in less than half an hour. High-level arrays, however, were beyond him for the moment. His cultivation in formation arts was only at the intermediate level. Main formations first, supplemented by intermediate ones. That was the plan Ye Tian set for himself. Day after day, he worked at it. He could complete roughly 100 basic formations a day, but only a handful of the intermediate ones. The cost was steep. No rest, no time for cultivation. 5 days passed in a blur. When he finally paused, he had finished 489 primary formations and 18 intermediate formations. Ye Tian embedded the defensive formations into the walls surrounding the coastal base and laid the offensive arrays out in the open ground beyond the base. During the whole operation, the base was sealed. No one was allowed in or out for fear of disturbing the arrays. He gave himself a rare half-day's rest and refused to push on because he couldn't maintain that frantic pace forever. If his combat effectiveness dropped, the consequences would be disastrous. The formations only barely held back the tide of beasts. They kept the base from being overwhelmed, but they didn't win the fight for him. He still had to rely on his own strength, so he had to stay at his peak. Chapter 11. It was daylight when a blood-colored shadow streaked into Ye Tian's courtyard, drawing the gaze of everyone present. The figure was small and compact. Little Blood had returned. Ye Tian had spent the past few days furiously perfecting the formation. He'd sent Little Blood out as a scout to gather intelligence. Now the creature hopped forward and delivered its report. Little Blood, your aura's stronger, Ye Tian said. Did you feed on many ferocious beasts out there? I didn't eat much, Little Blood retorted. Only a little. How much is a little? Ye Tian asked with a laugh. A few hundred high-grade ferocious beasts and 7 or 8 top-tier ones, Little Blood answered matter-of-factly. That's called a little? Ye Tian shot it a hard look, then pressed on. What did you find? When will the beast tide break out? I watched from the sky, Little Blood said seriously. A huge number of ferocious beasts have gathered to the east. There's a terrible aura there. I didn't dare get closer. About 30,000 kilometers east, I saw a tear in space and countless beasts pouring out of it. A spatial rift? Ye Tian's voice went hollow. He was stunned. He finally understood why the beast tide had erupted. It all traced back to a rupture in space. It turns out the warriors from the Demon Sea Grand Base must have found a fresh spatial rift. Ye Tian murmured. If it's a newly opened rift, then 60,000 kilometers, although it sounds far, is actually dangerously close when you consider the territory of the Beast Kings. The Demon Sea Base sits very near Linhai Base, so the rift is only about 60,000 kilometers from the Demon Sea Base. That's far too close. A brand new spatial rift was an absolute catastrophe for the Demon Sea Grand Base and for the other large bases in the area. If left unchecked, the rift would pour out powerful beasts until the bases were overrun. The only way to prevent total destruction was to kill every beast that came through and take control of the rift itself. But that meant breaching the other end of the tier in space. Breaking into the rift's far side would be extraordinarily difficult, perhaps impossible. Ye Tian pictured the scale of the task and felt the weight of how precarious everything had become. Don't overthink it. Holding the coastal base is what matters. Ye Tian put the space crack out of his mind and ordered Xiao Blood to leave the base and fly up to watch for the beast tide. As soon as the tide starts, Xiao Blood will report back. Once the scout was gone, Ye Tian didn't bother with a refining formation. It wouldn't change the situation, so he threw himself into cultivation. Training every day, his strength rose steadily. Any improvement was better than wasting time. The senior officers at Linhai Base weren't idle either. They began organizing the warriors into fighting units. Every warrior had to join, no exceptions. At the same time, civilians and less powerful fighters started digging tunnels. Beasts capable of moving underground were extremely rare, so the tunnels gave ordinary people and children a place to hide away from the frontline fighting. If the coastal base was ever breached, surviving by slipping into those tunnels might be their only hope. By the third day, the whole coastal base had been put on full alert. Little Blood returned and flew straight to Ye Tian with a report. "Master, the beast tide is moving," Little Blood said. "It's spreading in all directions, and a small pack of fierce beasts is heading for the coastal base." "Any king beasts?" Ye Tian asked immediately. That was the question he cared about most. King beasts were on a completely different level from ordinary fierce beasts. If one showed up, it would complicate everything. If it turned out to be a weak king beast, Ye Tian felt confident. His speed wasn't inferior to a king's, and his offensive power already exceeded the pinnacle of a grandmaster. In raw striking ability, he was approaching king level. He could take on, and possibly kill, a lesser king beast. What he feared was a powerful king beast. Those creatures could outmatch even top fighters by a wide margin, and a truly strong king would be far more dangerous than any pack of fierce beasts. There's only one king beast, but there are over 100 top-tier ferocious beasts, tens of thousands of high-level ones, and hundreds of thousands of lesser beasts. Little Blood rattled off the staggering figures. "So many?" Ye Tian frowned. Given the coastal base's current defenses, they could only handle the ordinary beasts. The top tiers and the king beast would have to be dealt with by him and Little Blood. "Little Blood, you'll take the top-tier beasts. Are you sure you can handle them?" "Of course," Little Blood replied, brimming with confidence. "They're nothing compared to me." Relief washed over Ye Tian. Good. Little Blood would hold the top-tier beasts. Old Man Li and the other great warriors and elite fighters would tackle the high and mid-level beasts. As for the low-level packs, they couldn't be stopped outright, but with the formation's help, they could barely hold them off for a while. Ye Tian's task was clear. Kill the king beast as quickly as possible. "I've finished refining the yin-dimensional pulse and added 10 points of elephant strength. My base physical power is now 11 elephant force. With the yuan force increase, it doubles to 22. Qingfeng Slash multiplies my attack by 6, and the Pseudo-Upanishad's strength talent multiplies it by 30. That brings my maximum strike to 3,960 elephant force." Ye Tian ran the numbers in his head. The ordinary sect master only had about 200 elephant force, and even a lesser king beast's attack was only 400 to 500. But the beast approaching now didn't look like one of the weaker ones. If it had an offensive aptitude, it would be a hard fight. He forced himself to hope the king beast wasn't too strong. With that resolved, he moved at once toward where Old Man Li was waiting. "Master Ye, how did you get here?" Old Man Li's voice broke with surprise as Ye Tian arrived. "The beast tide is coming," Old Man Li said, his face paling. "Half an hour at most. Get ready. Prepare to fight." "What? The beast tide is coming?" Ye Tian repeated, the words hitting him like a cold gust. Old Man Li's expression tightened into panic. "Master Ye, how big is the beast tide?" Old Man Li asked, his face drawn with fear. "One king beast, over 100 top-tier beasts, tens of thousands of high-level beasts, and hundreds of thousands of mid- and low-level beasts," Ye Tian answered bluntly. There was no point in hiding the truth. Even if it terrified Old Man Li, he needed to know. A cold dread washed over Old Man Li. For a long moment he could not find his voice. "I'll take the king beast and those 100-plus top-tier monsters with my beast companion," Ye Tian went on. "The coastal base will only have to contend with the high-level and the mid- and low-level beasts. Rely on the defensive formation I've set up. It should buy you some time. Your only job is to hold out. I'll kill the king beast as fast as I can and come support you. That was Ye Tian's promise. Master Ye, can you really slay the king beast? Old Man Li managed at last. If anyone else had said it, he would have doubted them 1,000 times over, but it was Ye Tian speaking, and that gave him some reassurance. As long as it isn't an exceptionally powerful king beast, I can kill it, Ye Tian replied without hesitation. Old Man Li's confidence blossomed in an instant. Master Ye, he said, voice steady, I'll lead the other martial artists to hold the beasts off and buy you time. Ye Tian nodded once, then moved and was gone in a blink. Old Man Li immediately summoned the fighters to the city wall to defend the coastal base. Civilians, following one order after another, hurried into the underground passages. Tension crackled through the air. A great battle between man and beast was about to begin. Chapter 112. The seaside base sat crowded along the city walls. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder on the ramparts, straining their eyes toward the horizon. Fear hung over them like fog, so thick that some couldn't even steady their Yuanli weapons, spirit energy blades, in trembling hands. Old Man Li and the other masters had already told them what was coming. A tide of beasts, hundreds of thousands of feral creatures, led by a king beast, and hundreds of top-tier monsters. It was only because the masters had repeatedly promised that someone would take care of the king beast and the greatest predators that any of them had kept their nerve long enough to hold their ground at all. Still, with every passing minute, the tension among the troops grew. Then one of the elite scouts, known for his eagle-sharp vision, suddenly raised his arm and shouted, "The beast tide is coming, a boundless wave of feral beasts, led by a king beast. The king beast is a massive black bear, 100 meters tall." Rumble. His words hit the assembled fighters like an explosion, and panic swept through them at once. Silence. If this battle can't be stopped, we won't just die. We'll take our families and friends with us. We have no choice but to fight. Old Man Li barked, his voice tight with authority. Inside, he was terrified. He was a master, though, and fear was a luxury he couldn't afford in front of so many weaker fighters. For their sake, he tamped down his panic and forced his face into calm resolve. Above them, Ye Tian and Xiao Blood hovered in the air, eyes fixed on the tide of beasts approaching in the distance. "Little Blood," Ye Tian said, voice steady, "I'll take out that king beast first. You handle the top-tier ones. As for the rest, don't worry about them for now." He wanted to stop every single ferocious creature, but that was impossible. The beast hordes stretched along the horizon. Even a king-level warrior couldn't blunt such numbers all at once. Their only option was a decapitation strike, take out the leaders and break the horde's will to fight. Ye Tian did not teleport. He flew toward the king beast under his own power, keeping teleportation in reserve, his ace up the sleeve, not to be revealed yet. In an instant, Ye Tian closed the distance and stood directly before the king beast, staring it down. His replication talent's range had expanded to a full 1,000 meters, just enough to encompass the creature, and he read its attributes at a glance. Species: black-backed warbear. Bloodline talent: poor, barely sufficient. Defense talent: medium-strength talent, medium. "This king beast isn't simple," Ye Tian murmured, his face tightening. The bear's bloodline talent was weak, barely enough for it to have become a king beast, likely a fluke. It probably couldn't develop its bloodline much further. Even so, its base physical power upon breaking through to king rank was enormous, roughly equivalent to the strength of 300 elephants, comparable to the kind of boost a human king receives from a level increase, about 150 elephant equivalents, plus additional yuan force. More importantly, its medium-strength talent meant that its raw power could be multiplied by more than 5 times, pushing its effective strength to the equivalent of some 1,500 elephants. On top of that, its medium defensive talent would blunt a great deal of incoming damage. Ye Tian's expression grew even more serious. The combination of that potential strength and solid defense made this opponent far more dangerous than its weak bloodline alone suggested. Ye Tian's strikes could wound the black-backed warbear, but they wouldn't fell it quickly. Time was the real enemy. He couldn't afford to waste a second. "Kill," he ordered. Without hesitation, Ye Tian lunged forward and drove the Qingfeng at the bear. The creature answered with a furious earth-shaking roar, and swung a paw that felt as thick as a slab of earth. The blade met that paw. Qingfeng scored a 3-inch gouge that spattered dark blood, and the bear staggered backward, trampling a top-tier ferocious beast and scattering several other high-level predators beneath its retreating feet. The air filled with their enraged roars. The black-backed warbear barked orders to the others, pushing them aside. "Clear the way! Go hit the coastal base," it commanded. The surrounding beasts obediently broke off and surged toward the outpost so they wouldn't impede the bear. Ye Tian didn't let up. He drove the Qingfeng in a relentless rhythm, striking, feinting, then striking again. Chop! 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 The duel between man and beast raged on. Ye Tian's Qingfeng slash bit into the black-backed warbear again and again, but he couldn't land a decisive blow. The bear was a king-class beast, its reactions were quick and its speed respectable, and it kept avoiding the vital points. Its attacks weren't the strongest, but its agility made it hard to pin down. A short distance away, Little Blood plunged into the press of beasts, barreling toward the apex predators, as if nothing else mattered. It paid no heed to the blows that rained off its hide. Little Blood wasn't particularly fast. Its cultivation was still low, and its speed aptitude only average. But its high flight aptitude, and whatever boosts it had allowed it to keep pace with most top-tier beasts. Against those rare apex beasts that specialized in speed, though, it couldn't quite match them. Where it lacked in velocity, Little Blood more than made up for in resilience and raw power. Its defense was among the very best. It shrugged off strikes that would fell lesser foes. Its strength aptitude had topped out, too. A single strike from it exceeded what many apex beasts could deliver. On top of that, other latent talents simmered beneath the surface. Dragon Soul talent. Little Blood roared. Rumble. A huge dragon-shaped shadow unfurled over Xiao Blood. The moment it appeared, every ferocious beast within a 10-mile radius stiffened under a crushing pressure. It was the Dragon Soul's suppression, an aura that kept other beasts from drawing on their full strength. Then Xiao Blood emitted a deep draconic groan, his high dragon roar talent. The sound exploded outward in a powerful shockwave. Countless beasts were staggered and killed outright. Even some of the weaker apex predators fell. One by one, carcasses rained down across the battlefield. From his post on the coastal base wall, Old Man Li made a strangled sound, utterly stunned by what he was seeing. In speed and efficiency at slaughtering beasts, even Ye Tian could not match Xiao Blood. Indeed, Xiao Blood's dragon blood allowed him to strike on a vast scale in a way other races simply could not. "There is hope," Old Man Li and the others murmured, relief trembling in their voices. But the fierce beasts were not stupid. One small creature could not possibly have killed like that, and when the truth seemed to be an abnormality, instinct snapped to attention. A savage roar rolled through the ranks. A pack of top-tier beasts diverted and closed in on Little Blood, intent on ending the mutant among them. They were convinced this was an alien traitor and must be destroyed. Little Blood had managed to draw off the strongest attackers, but that only made the situation worse for the humans. The rest of the horde did not falter. They kept surging toward the coastal base. The Great Being had ordered them to smash through the human defenses, and unless the beasts were slaughtered outright, nothing could stop that tide. Waves of high-level, mid-level, and low-level predators poured forward and slammed into Ye Tian's killing arrays, laid out hastily in the open. The formations did their work. Beasts who fell into the pattern were cut down, torn apart by invisible lines of force and precise traps. The attackers didn't know how to dismantle an array, they only knew how to swarm. They tried to overwhelm it with numbers, and they paid for that with lives, again and again. Still, the tactic was brutally effective. After losing countless comrades, the berserker ranks finally breached the field arrays. The survivors poured through too. He gasped like a living avalanche, and suddenly the city walls were right before them, close enough to touch. Old Man Li took one look at the scene and rose to his feet. "Archers, loose your arrows. Elite fighters, take out the mid-level beasts. Great warriors, follow me. We'll cut down the high-level ones. And let me make this clear. Anyone who tries to run will be the first one I put down." Without another word, he launched himself over the city wall and was immediately among the high-level beasts. The others surged after him. Archers opened fire. Squads of elite martial artists poured out to tackle the mid-tier creatures. Nobody tried to flee. Escape would only lead to certain death. The battle degenerated into brutal chaos. Warriors fell by the dozen in every heartbeat, and countless beasts bit the dust. But with tens of thousands of fighters forming an unbroken cordon, the remaining monsters could not punch through the defensive lines at the wall. For a time, the coastal base held, the tide of beasts was checked, and the place was not swept away. Still, everyone there understood the truth. The fate of the base did not hinge on the skirmishes around the wall. It all came down to one confrontation: Ye Tian versus the King Beast. If Ye Tian won, the base would be saved. If the King Beast prevailed, the whole garrison would be destroyed. Chapter 113. 10 minutes had passed. The King-class black-backed warbear still lived, though it was battered. Its wounds gaped and its blood soaked the earth red. It kept fighting, and it was terrifyingly strong. Ye Tian himself was uninjured, but the battle had drained him. His physical strength and his spirit energy were both nearly spent. He forced his powers outward and activated a pseudo-Upanishads-level ability, the blood-devouring talent. Swallow! A gush of the bear's blood shot into Ye Tian's mouth, and he swallowed it in one motion. The stolen blood flooded his body, replenishing his stamina and spirit. That was the terrible advantage of the blood-devouring talent. He could feed on his enemy's blood to restore himself, while the bear could not regain its lost strength. Ye Tian glanced back toward Linhai Base, and his expression hardened. The feral beasts were too many. Tens of thousands of martial artists had already fallen. If the assault continued, Linhai Base would not hold. He made his decision. Teleport. In an instant, Ye Tian vanished and reappeared before the black-backed warbear, right at eye level. Ye Tian drove a full-power strike straight through the black-backed warbear's eyes. His sword Qi tore into the beast's skull, sending a spray of blood and a pained roar into the air. At the same instant, the bear lashed out with a crushing backhand that slammed into Ye Tian. Knocked flying, Ye Tian managed, even as he was sent reeling, to trigger two tremendous talents. Pseudo-Upanishads, defensive talent, Pseudo-Upanishads grade, diamond bone talent. Those pseudo-mystical level talents took the brunt of the king-class beast's blow, preventing a fatal injury. Still, the shock tore through Ye Tian's internal organs. He was winded and badly shaken. He didn't hesitate. Top healing talent. The healing talent surged through him, knitting damaged tissue and steadying his breath until he was whole again. The bear, meanwhile, was howling in agony. The strike had seriously damaged its brain. Seizing the opening, Ye Tian began to teleport. He flashed in and out of range, each appearance delivering a targeted strike at the wounds around the bear's eyes. Time and again he struck those exposed, vulnerable places. After a few relentless assaults, the warbear's breath grew ragged and shallow. With one final shudder, it collapsed to the ground, defeated. After confirming the black-backed battle bear was dead, Ye Tian didn't even pause to harvest the king-level beast's blood. He sprinted to Old Man Li's side. His teleportation range had increased. A single jump now spanned nearly 10 kilometers. After several such jumps, he materialized at the city wall. No one suspected teleportation. To them, he simply moved impossibly fast. Die! Ye Tian roared and struck. Ribbons of swordlight lanced out, each blade stroke infused with the combined intent of his twin swords. The rays cut down fierce beasts in their hundreds. Even elite monsters were shredded by a single beam. Ye Tian moved like a whirlwind, mowing through the dense ranks as if cutting down weeds. With him in the fight, the pressure on the Linhai base warriors eased dramatically. In less than half an hour, the onslaught was over. Hundreds of thousands of fierce beasts lay dead. Even the elite attackers had been almost entirely cut down. A handful of the faster beasts tried to flee, but Ye Tian streaked after them and hunted them down one by one. For the moment, the beast tide had broken. The ordinary warriors cheered when they saw the monsters withdraw. One after another, they poured out of the base to gather beast blood and pick through the carcasses for salvage. Ye Tian, Old Man Li, and the others did not let themselves relax. They understood why this wave had come, and they knew it was only a minor surge, not the main army. When the dust had settled, Ye Tian flew to where the king-class black-backed warbear had fallen and harvested its blood. Because the bear was enormous, he was able to collect roughly 10,000 vials of king-grade B, East blood. Ye Tian handed the carcass of the black-backed battle bear to Xiao Blood. Xiao Blood not only loved drinking the blood of fierce beasts, he also liked tearing into their flesh, a practice much like the beasts themselves used to grow stronger. "Master," Xiao Blood ran over. "What is it?" Ye Tian asked. Xiao Blood looked a little embarrassed. "Master, the blood on those mighty beasts you hunted, can that blood be mine?" Ye Tian smiled and ruffled his head. "Sure, it's all yours." Xiao Blood brightened, then hesitated. "Master, I remember you have a lot of storage pouches. I don't have any, and there's too much blood to drink at once. Could you give me a couple of pouches?" "All right." Ye Tian took 2 storage pouches, transferred their contents into his spatial storage, emptied and cleared them, removed his ownership seals, and handed the clean pouches to Xiao Blood. Xiao Blood quickly attuned them and was delighted. Little Blood remembered that Xiao Zi always wore a storage bag, and every time she took something out of it, the bag would grow hot. When the opportunity came, he finally managed to filch 2 storage pouches from his mistress. "Heh, these bags are mine. The owner won't be getting them back," he muttered to himself, pleased. With that, he darted back to where the elite beasts had fallen, scooped up the pooled blood from the carcasses, and stuffed it into the stolen bags. It didn't take long. Both pouches were soon brimming with beast blood. The remainder he desperately drank down and immediately began to refine, using the feral blood to bolster his strength. It took 3 full days to clear away the corpses outside the base. Every household received a generous share of meat and blood, and the families of the warriors who had died in battle were given substantial compensation. A family meeting at the Lin household was then called. "Master Ye, the tally is in," Lin Wanli reported. "We lost 12,123 warriors in the battle and roughly 20,000 civilians." Ye Tian frowned. "How did so many civilians die?" "Several high-level ferocious beasts broke into the inner sections of the base," Lin Wanli said. "Not many people had gone down into the shelters, and a lot of civilians refused to go underground, so they were caught. With too few warriors on hand, it took longer than it should to eliminate those beasts, hence the heavy civilian losses." Lin Wanli sounded helpless. Ye Tian sighed and ran a hand over his face. "There wasn't much we could do. There were simply too many beasts. Against hundreds of thousands of them, it's almost miraculous the coastal base still stands. All things considered, the casualties could have been far worse." Old Man Li finally spoke up, voice tight with worry. "Master Ye, what do we do next? The beast tide isn't over, is it?" "It's not over yet. I'm going to the Demon Sea Grand Base. For this side, keep watching the wilds," Ye Tian said. "Keep a liaison posted. Send me short reports. Even if I'm at Demon Sea, you'll be able to reach me. If a beast tide forms, contact me immediately." "Lord Ye Tian, you really intend to go to the Demon Sea Grand Base?" Elder Li's face went pale. "Isn't that too dangerous?" Elder Li's worry wasn't so much for Ye Tian's safety as for the protection of the coastal Linhai base. If Ye Tian left, who would guard the base? Ye Tian had promised to come running if needed, but what if a crisis happened and his rescue came too late? That thought made Elder Li reluctant to let him go. Ye Tian's jaw tightened. "I've made up my mind. It'll be as I say." Without leaving room for further argument, he turned and left. Chapter 114. Little Blood, let's go! Ye Tian vaulted onto Little Blood's back. The creature sprang up, and they flew toward the Demon Sea Grand Base. As they drew near, the thunder of battle rolled over them. From a distance, Ye Tian could see the base under siege. He squinted, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. The assault was coordinated, attacks from sky and earth at once. Above, squadrons of flying ferocious beasts and numerous king-class beasts pounded the defensive formations. Beneath the surface, swarms of top-tier ferocious beasts, high-level predators, and an uncountable mass of mid- and low-level attackers churned, tunneling, and surging toward the base. Simply by scale, this army dwarfed the force that had assaulted the coastal base. It was easily 100 times larger, and its quality was far greater. Yet amid the chaos, one creature stood motionless, utterly unmoved by the clamor. It was a golden ape, not especially tall, maybe 50 meters, but its presence filled the sky. Even the king-class beasts looked like ants beside it. Suddenly, the golden ape turned its head and looked straight at Ye Tian. That single glance sent a chill through him. The Great Terror! Ye Tian realized at last the true power of the ape beast. They were over 100 kilometers apart, and the ape towered 1,000 meters above the battlefield, yet it still found him. Still, after that one glance, it dismissed him completely. A deep, almost amused voice echoed, "You think I'm too weak to bother with?" Ye Tian murmured to himself. On the surface, he was only a master with a single refined meridian. The golden ape had not detected his true innate power, so of course it paid no attention to such a minor cultivator. He studied the fight for a while and came to a decision. The ferocious beasts would not bother turning aside to strike a weak coastal outpost. If they were going to attack it at all, it would be only after they had first broken through the larger Demon Sea base. Staying at the Linhai base would be a waste of time. Better to enter the Demon Sea base and find out what was really happening. Compared with the outside, the Demon Sea Grand Base clearly had a much better grasp of the situation. Ye Tian approached it from the opposite direction. Several flying beasts tried to intercept him along the way, but he cut them down without difficulty. When he neared the base, he found many of the formation portals sealed. Ye Tian produced his identity card and his formation mage badge. Once the guards verified them, they temporarily activated a small formation gate to let him in. Inside, the base felt heavy with tension. The atmosphere was grim. Everyone was on edge, and the distant sounds of fighting could be heard outside the walls. Ye Tian didn't know whether Yueling was still out there, so he reached for his contact device. "Ye Tian, are you back? Wait for me," came Yueling's reply. Ye Tian turned and saw Yueling approaching not long after. Yueling looked terrible, face drawn and pale, one arm hanging weakly at his side. Blood had soaked part of his sleeve. It was clear the arm was badly injured. "Are you hurt?" Ye Tian asked, moving to support him. "I went into a battlefield and was badly hurt," Ye Tian said. "If one of the family's top masters hadn't rescued me, I don't think I'd have made it back." He gave a bitter smile. On the plus side, the injury meant I had to return inside the base to recover. Yuling's expression changed. "What happened to the coastal base?" "There was a beast tied there, too," Ye Tian replied honestly. "But the beasts weren't particularly strong this time. I cleared them out." "Cleared them out?" Yuling stared. She had imagined a beast tide besieging a base would bring out the heavy hitters, dozens of top-tier beasts, maybe even king beasts. For Ye Tian to handle it alone was astonishing. "That's incredible." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been at the back of her mind. "By the way, how is my sister doing?" Before he left, Ye Tian had entrusted his sister to Wei Ling's care and asked that she be brought back to the Yu family. "Your sister is all right," Yuling said quickly. "She's only an elite martial artist. Aside from a very small number of elder elites who've lost their potential, the other elite fighters are still inside the base. Only those who have reached the great warrior rank would be forced out onto the battlefield." Ye Tian let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. If his sister was safe, then at least his only living relative was alive. "It sounds like the fighting's bad," he said. "Do you know what actually happened?" Yuling sighed. "It's complicated. Within a 100,000-mile radius, 3 major bases were attacked. Each base was overwhelmed by huge numbers of ferocious beasts, and each of those beast armies was led by an invincible king beast." Invincible king beast. The name made Ye Tian think of the golden ape he'd seen. That had to be one of them. The invincible king rank was the apex, the human equivalent of being an invincible monarch, monstrously powerful, almost untouchable. Even strong king-level fighters looked like ants in front of an invincible king. "Someone like him can be called an invincible master," Yuling said. "There's also the invincible king, an invincible king-level being, even an invincible king-class beast. One of those can cross levels and kill someone far stronger." "Does the Demon Sea Grand Base have anything that can deal with an invincible king?" Ye Tian asked. "If they didn't, it would be disastrous." "Nothing," Yueling replied, shaking her head. "At present, the Demon Sea Grand Base has no true invincible king. There used to be one, the Yun family's old ancestor, but he's gone off to the super base and is attempting to make contact there now. The Yun clan did leave something behind, though, They project the aura of an invincible king as a ruse. That false presence makes any invincible king outside the base hesitate, convinced there's an invincible king inside, so they don't dare to move openly. If that deterrent fails and the real invincible king decides to act, I'm afraid the base's defensive formations won't hold for long. If we delay too long, they'll surely find us, Ye Tian said, frowning. We can only hope the Yun family's old ancestor returns in time. He hadn't expected the situation at the Demon Sea Grand Base to be this desperate. Everything now hinged on stalling for time. As an array mage, he normally didn't have to fight, but when things reached a breaking point, even warriors as young as 15 were being sent to the front. Before long, the Array Mage Association called him in to craft formations and supply battlefield arrays. Each array improved their ability to fell the ferocious beasts, so the mage's work was critical. His daily quota was 50 basic arrays, not a heavy load. If he finished early, he'd still have time to cultivate. Yes, he could earn extra association points by making additional arrays, but those points meant nothing to him now, and low-level formations wouldn't change the current crisis. He had no intention of wasting time on more than required. With the lull in fighting, Ye Tian used the spare time to cultivate. The war dragged on, but 5 more days passed without any distress signals from the coastal base. It was clearly safe for the moment. My physical strength has reached 13 elephant powers, he murmured, but even with the Pseudo-Upanishad's talent and the Qingfeng slash, that's only enough to take down weaker king beasts. Just then, Yuling arrived with good news. Chapter 115. The old ancestor of the Yun family had returned. When Ye Tian heard the news, he could hardly contain his joy. With the Yun family's patriarch back, the Demon Sea Grand Base might yet be saved, and that was exactly what Ye Tian wanted. He hadn't wanted the base destroyed, which was why he had fled with his sister. Word of the return spread quickly through the Demon Sea Grand Base. The senior leaders let out a collective sigh of relief. Their losses over the last period had been heavy. The sect master didn't even know how many had died, and a few king-level fighters had fallen. Had the Yun family's old ancestor not come back, the fierce beasts might have launched a full-scale assault. Invincible king-level beasts could have broken through, and the Grand Base would have been in real peril. The day after the Yun family's old ancestor returned, Yueling told Ye Tian that the Yun family had consulted with the other major powers. They were ready to counterattack, to drive back the fierce beasts, and to pull the Demon Sea Grand Base back from the brink. In a battle like this, every fighter above the rank of great martial artist had to be sent out. Even a formation mage like Ye Tian was needed. Only on a battlefield of such scale could a formation mage truly unleash the power of formations. Ye Tian rode with the army into the fighting. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and other powerful fighters were spread across thousands of miles. Against the massive hordes of ferocious beasts, human numbers were punishingly small. Still, humans had their own advantages: superior weapons, carefully laid formations, healing elixirs, and higher intellect. In the end, raw numbers mattered far less than the presence of king-level combatants. This war would be decided by clashes at that tier, above all, by who prevailed between the human invincible king and the invincible king-class beast. High overhead, the Yun family's ancient ancestor appeared. Clad in white and startlingly youthful in appearance, he seemed almost like a prince gliding through the air, a calm, radiant figure who could tip the balance of the whole battle. Yun Mengli, the venerable old matriarch of the Yun family, was a name that carried weight. Her record was the stuff of legend. As a grandmaster, she had once slain a 3-headed king beast in a single battle. After ascending to the king tier, she had remained undefeated for 10 years, then quietly withdrew from the world. Few knew she had left the Demon Sea Grand Base and taken refuge in the Super Base. If not for this sudden tide of beasts, she would still be there now. "Fall back!" Yun Mengli barked, her voice cold as steel. She called to the golden ape, ordering it to lead the attacking beasts away. The ape only bared its teeth in a cruel smile, mocking her command. Without another sound, it lunged forward. The two titans collided at 10,000 meters, their clash ripping through the void. Their blows shook the sky. Anyone who dared to look up would have felt dizzy from the shockwaves. Beneath them, the field was carnage, warriors and feral beasts tearing into one another in a bloody, merciless grind. The scene was grotesque, like meat through a mill. Even the masters on the ground could not count on surviving the hour. Ye Tian stood with the Yu family's team, as several of their array mages had erected a set of high-level formations, sweeping a 10-mile radius. The magic tore through packs of fierce beasts like a scythe. Bodies littered the ground so thickly the earth seemed paved with corpses. Even the largest, most fearsome beasts didn't last long against the formation's onslaught. "Little brother Ye Tian, you should rest," an older voice said. "You've been holding the formation for half an hour. You must be exhausted. Let me take over." The speaker was Yue Lai, a mid-level mage of the Yuo family. Though his combat ability reached the rank of a great martial artist, his reserves of Yuan force were modest. He had burned through them within minutes and had to step aside to recuperate. He just recovered and hurried over to help. "I'm fine. Go help the others," Ye Tian answered. It wasn't a lie. Maintaining the advanced formation was brutally taxing on Yuan force, physical strength, and even on spirit, but Ye Tian pushed through. His feet were planted among the corpses of fierce beasts, the earth around him dark with blood, and he was visibly drained. Still, he kept the formation going, buying the others time. Ye Tian had quietly activated his blood-eating talent, drawing on blood energy to mend his vitality. The life force in his body surged until he felt whole again. He even forced his reserves beyond their limit to pressure the formation into replenishing faster. In truth, the blood-eating ability genuinely restored his vitality. The recovery of his physical strength and spiritual energy was only a byproduct. Yue Lai, seeing him look steadier, assumed Ye Tian was merely clinging on and came over to urge him to rest. Then Yue Lai's face went ashen. "No, a king-class beast has broken into the formation. Everyone in the Yue family is in danger." Up to that point, the Yue family's sect masters had been cutting down the ferocious beasts within the array, but the formation alone couldn't handle such a mass of attackers. The array had to work together with the masters. The fighters held the beasts in check, so the formation could harvest and destroy them in waves. Now a king-class beast had charged through the defenses, and even the Yue family's masters weren't able to stop it. "Yue Lai, you stay and maintain the formation," Ye Tian said urgently. "I'll go inside and deal with it." "Ye Tian, you're a formation mage. What are you doing going into the formation?" Yue Lai's voice trembled with panic. She was afraid he would die, but it was too late. Ye Tian had already rushed inside. Seeing that, Yue Lai had no choice but to take over the formation herself, replacing him at the control point. Inside the circle, the Yu clan's sect masters watched in growing despair as a king beast charged in. It wasn't the strongest of its kind, but it was more than the assembled masters could handle. Only a true grandmaster, someone with both king-rank offensive power and king-rank speed, a near-invincible force, could hope to stop such a creature. None of those quasi-invincible fighters were present. The Yue clan's top-ranked warriors were tied up on another battlefield and couldn't come to their aid. "Are we going to die?" Yue Ling thought helplessly as the beast bore down on them. At that moment, two of the clan's strongest sect masters surged forward. Both drew on mid-tier sword arts, unleashing bronze-rank sword techniques that amplified their strikes several times over, enough to match the attack power of a weaker king beast. But in speed and defense, it was far inferior. Still, this particular king beast was no weakling. Its strike carried the force of 1,000 elephants. Rumble. The beast slammed into the two Yue family sect masters with shocking power. Their sword auras shattered in an instant. The culmination of their inner strength burst apart and scattered. Both masters were hurled away, tumbling through the air, and no one could tell if they were still alive. As Yue Ling and the other masters braced to unleash desperate, all-or-nothing techniques to overwhelm the beast by numbers, a lone figure stepped forward and planted himself between them and the creature. "It's him," someone from the Yue family cried. Yu Ben, one of the sect masters, recognized the newcomer instantly. Yue Ling's face went pale when she saw him. "Ye Tian, you can't face that king beast. Get back!" Ye Tian didn't budge. He stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the beast, studying it with calm intensity. From his assessment, he could tell at a glance. Species, Giant Spirit War Beast Bloodline Talent, Extraordinary. It wasn't a king beast with any rare special aptitude, but its bloodline talent was strong, classified as extraordinary. If it kept developing, it could eventually ascend to the ultimate king level. If the creature had truly reached the absolute pinnacle of king-level power, even without any special talent, it could have crushed Ye Tian with a single blow. It was nowhere near that far, though. Its strength was only comparable to 1,000 elephants, not yet fully a king beast. Ye Tian drew his sword. Brilliant light sliced through the air. Combining his pseudo-Aoi-level strength talent with bronze-level swordsmanship, his strike reached its peak force. The giant spirit war beast lunged to seize the blade, but Ye Tian's slash sheared off its arm. The beast howled in pain. Ha! A king beast with no defensive talent is worthless. Not even as good as that black-backed warbear. Ye Tian sneered. Before the beast could recover, Ye Tian moved again. Another clean strike ripped across its throat, nearly decapitating it. With a heavy thud it collapsed, its life force draining away. A king beast felled by Ye Tian, and so easily. Not far away, the observers stared in stunned silence. Every member of the Yue family sat in stunned disbelief. Chapter 116. Ye Tian killed a king beast. Yueling could hardly believe it. She'd known Ye Tian back when he was relatively weak, she remembered him clearly, and she had even been saved by him once. Back then his cultivation and strength had been far below hers. She had assumed he would always be the junior, perhaps someone she could one day take under her wing. The idea seemed laughable now. His talent, she realized, was extraordinary. His swordsmanship, his raw power, his speed, all of it had developed to an astonishing degree. With twin blades he had felled a king beast. That, in Yueling's mind, was nothing short of a peerless master. Suddenly, it made sense why Ye Tian had been able to turn the tide during the beast surge at Linhai Base. Against an ordinary king beast, he was nearly unbeatable. Only a truly exceptional king beast might pose him a real threat. His strength was finally revealed. No longer holding back, Ye Tian fought openly beside the Yu family, cutting down the apex beasts in the formation one by one. Yueling hurried over, eyes wide with surprise. Ye Tian, I always thought your power was, at best, on par with a strong sect master, maybe even below an ultimate sect master. I never expected you to be comparable to king-level cultivators, able to slay ordinary king beasts. You flatter me. Ye Tian grinned, utterly unmodest. A born talent, heaven made me this way. Yueling gave a polite smile and agreed on the surface, but inwardly she felt a quiet ache. Compared with Ye Tian, she seemed weak and ordinary. She had once believed they stood on equal footing, but now his combat ability clearly surpassed hers. He had the backing of the Yue family, had seized several important opportunities, and his future looked likely to reach king level. The thought nagged at her. Ye Tian might not be inferior to her at all. When she thought about it clearly, she hated how much she'd been overrating herself. The goal she'd chased her whole life, everything she'd sacrificed and trained for, was in Ye Tian's eyes nothing more than a small role that could be cut down without a second thought. The gap between them was immense. That was Ye Tian's ambition. Yueling's eyes shifted toward Gao Guan, where Yun Mengli and the Invincible King Beast were still locked in combat. Go lend your support there, he said. Ye Tian gave Yueling a brief pat on the shoulder and grunted assent. Yueling snapped back to attention, gave a quick nod, and the two of them moved off to help the other warriors press the attack against the remaining beasts. High above them, Yun Mengli's duel with the Invincible King Beast was drawing to a close. Both were wounded, but Yun Mengli remained unnervingly calm. The beast, by contrast, looked frantic. It snarled and tried to force Yun Mengli to fall back, refusing to admit defeat when neither side held a clear advantage. Then, without warning, Yun Mengli produced an object. The instant it appeared, the Invincible King Beast's expression changed. It was a bow, a golden longbow inlaid with mysterious runes, radiating an unquestionable sovereign majesty. The Invincible King Beast had never seen anything like it, but it felt the lethal intent directed at it from above. In ordinary circumstances, it would have fled at once. Now it didn't dare, and even if it had tried, the presence standing over it would not have allowed an escape. The beast let out a furious roar, blood and chi surging as it unleashed the power of its bloodline. Its breath rose like a storm. It was desperate. Damn it! The beast's gone berserk, someone spat. Wind crushed his anger down. There was no choice. He had to use the bow. The weapon was a top-tier Yuan Bing, a spirit armament known as a divine soldier. Divine soldiers themselves were graded, lower, middle, and upper, and legend spoke of an ultimate divine soldier beyond them all. To force such a weapon into action required pouring one's cultivation into it. With Win's current level, drawing on the bow's power would leave him debilitated for days. He never used the golden longbow lightly, but these were exceptional circumstances. The invincible king beast would rather die fighting than retreat. Yun Mengli forced himself to press the advantage. He poured his yuan force, qi, blood, and a portion of his life essence into the Zhongpin divine soldier longbow and drove it to its limit. A single long, golden arrow shot forth as if it had pierced the fabric of space. No matter how fast the beast was, no matter how keen its reflexes, it could not evade the shot. The arrow slammed through the invincible king beast's brow and shattered its brain. The strike was instant and final. The great beast fell dead, its massive body collapsing to the ground. Yun Mengli wanted to retrieve the carcass, but the effort had drained him. Too weak to remain aloft, he staggered back toward the demon sea base and slipped inside to tend to his wounds. Bang! The fallen body of the golden ape, an invincible, king-level beast, hit the ground and immediately drew the attention of every warrior and monster in the area. It's dead. That invincible beast is dead? Ye Tian stared in disbelief. Yun Mengli, who herself was on the invincible king level, had actually killed the golden ape. He hadn't expected it, but it was certainly welcome news. Ha ha ha! Our Yun family's old ancestor killed an invincible king beast. The old ancestor's already heard. After a short rest, he'll go finish off the rest of the king beasts. A Yun family king-level warrior shouted, laughter and pride in his voice. The crowd's morale exploded. The warriors' combat effectiveness surged, and without the leadership of the invincible king beast, the ferocious monsters began to fall apart. Half an hour later, Yun Mengli flew out from the base and rejoined the fight. Before long, another king-level beast collapsed beneath her power. The savage beasts finally broke and fled. The warriors pursued relentlessly, cutting them down without mercy until they had chased them for some 30,000 miles. Only then did the pursuit end and the cleanup of the battlefield begin. No one noticed that Ye Tian had slipped closer to the fallen invincible king beast. When he was about 1,000 meters away, Ye Tian's replication talent swept over the corpse and began to read its talents. Species, Golden Spirit Ape Bloodline Talent, Extraordinary Defense Talent, Medium Strength Talent, Medium Speed Talent, Medium Soul Transfer Talent, Advanced Soul Transfer Talent. Ye Tian had never encountered a soul-type transfer talent before. His curiosity spiked. Copy. He quietly copied that advanced soul transfer talent, intending to study it later, while ignoring the other, far more ordinary talents. Ye Tian assessed the creature. The golden spirit ape wasn't especially heaven-defying. Its cultivation seemed to have reached the peak of the king beast tier, but it lacked any high-level offensive talent. Even as an invincible king beast, it was relatively weak compared to others of that rank. With that settled, Ye Tian set to work clearing the battlefield. 3 days later, when the site had been cleaned up, he returned home, and Yue Ling personally escorted Ye Yu back. Night had finally settled. Only then did Ye Tian remember the spare copy of the high soul transfer talent tucked away in his inventory. He closed his eyes and spoke the command under his breath. Fusion. A reverberating rumble answered him as the soul metamorphosis began. It felt as if his very spirit were being kneaded and reshaped by some alien force, an agony unlike any physical pain, raw and indescribable. He clenched his teeth and bit back any sound, desperate not to wake Ye Yu. 10 long minutes passed before the torment eased. The fusion completed. Ye Tian felt the new ability settle into him. Instinctively, he checked his talent array and saw the change. Soul transfer talent advanced. Soul transfer. Could this let his soul move into other places or things? He wondered. He let his awareness sink into the soul sea, searching. Deep inside, he found the talent sigil hidden among the currents of his spirit. A small point of light marked the soul transfer skill. He merged his consciousness with it and began to read the information contained there, letting the talent's knowledge unfold within him. He'd only learned this method recently, the fastest way to test a talent without risking trial and error on himself. What he discovered stunned him. The soul transfer talent worked exactly like that. It let you send your soul into another creature's body, erase the resident soul, and take that body for yourself. Once inside, you could use that body to activate talents because talent marks are carried in the soul. It was perversely powerful and disturbingly invasive. There were important caveats. When you used someone else's body, the talent's effectiveness could drop. You couldn't always reach the same level of power that the body might have had with its original soul. If the occupied body was killed, your soul would snap back to your original body, but it would be traumatized and require time to recover. And the talent itself was tightly limited. In this higher-tier form, it could only possess another body for 1 month, with a 1-year cooldown before it could be used again. A top-tier soul transfer might allow longer occupation and a shorter cooldown, but those were rarer and far more valuable. Ye Tian, however, only possessed a high-level soul transfer aptitude, far from the top tier. It was unlikely he would ever reach the supreme level. That kind of talent was just too rare. If the golden spirit giant ape had truly been killed, its soul would already be gone. No, it probably wasn't the golden spirit giant ape at all. The ape's body was more likely being used as a vessel by someone with a superior soul transfer talent. The creature must have slipped away. It would have been almost impossible to force it to fight Yun Meng to the death. The realization hit Ye Tian like a lamp suddenly ignited. Occupy a body for a month, then a year of cooldown. This talent has to be used carefully. He began to scheme quietly, planning how best to exploit the limitation. Over the next few days, the High Command at the Demon Sea Grand Base began handing out the promised rewards. Every warrior, master, and king-tier fighter who had contributed to the battle received generous compensation. The base's projection equipment recorded the battlefield footage, and prizes like fierce beast meat and blood were distributed according to merit. For those who had died in combat, their next of kin received double the usual reward, a policy that drew no objections. Ye Tian had received many rewards for his deeds. The carcass of the king beast he had slain was delivered to his villa, far too large to keep, so he ended up selling it for a small fortune. What he did not know was that the king-level guardians of the Demon Sea Grand Base had been frantic these past days, rushing to the other 2 great bases to help repel a massive beast tide. Yun Mengli, together with invincible king levels from those bases, had slain 2 of the invading monarchs. The crisis at the 3 bases was over. The tide of beasts finally receded. That afternoon, Ye Tian was practicing at home when an elder arrived in person, Yu Ling, the venerable ancestor of the Yue family. Ye Tian rose and bowed. "Lord Yu Ling." Yu Ling waved off the formality with a laugh. "Ye Tian, you're being too stiff. You slew a king beast. Even if you're not king level yourself, that places you on par with many king level peers. Don't stand on ceremony with me. Call me Brother Yu." Ye Tian blinked at the unexpected intimacy but smiled and relaxed. The visit marked a turning point. The larger world was shifting again, and he was no longer just a bystander. Ye Tian's talent was unmistakable. He was on a path to become a king-level powerhouse. The Yue family had already decided they would rely on him in the future, so they couldn't afford to treat him with the usual cold, lofty attitude reserved for kings. If anything, they had to befriend him. "Brother Yue, what did you want to see me about?" Ye Tian asked, curious. "You didn't just come to make an introduction, did you?" "I didn't come just to say hello," Yu Ling replied. "I came to invite you to the king's meeting." "The king's meeting? You mean they invited me?" Ye Tian's surprise was obvious. "Yes." Yu Ling's tone was serious. "I didn't extend the invitation personally. The high-ranking kings of the Demon Sea Grand Base invited you. You killed a king-class beast with 2 sword strikes. Your strength has been noticed, and even the Dream King has acknowledged your status." "When is it?" Ye Tian asked. The opportunity was exactly what he'd been hoping for. If he wanted to move into king-level circles and learn the deeper secrets, even gather intelligence about the superbases, this was the fastest route. He couldn't afford to isolate himself. Alone, there was no way to advance quickly. "Be there tomorrow at 10 in the morning, the 10th floor of the Yun family's cloud tower." Yue Ling pressed the invitation into Ye Tian's hand and urged him on his way. As she left, she added, half in surprise, I never expected to break into the king-level circle so quickly. Ye Tian folded the invitation and smiled faintly. He spent the night practicing. The next morning, he arrived at the Yun residence on schedule. He caught sight of a familiar face, Yun Feng. Yun Feng had just advanced into the sect master ranks as well. With his supreme wind blade talent, he was one of the more formidable figures among the sect masters. His cultivation speed was respectable, sitting at the middle tier. Given time, 10 years, maybe 20, he might well dominate that realm. Ye Tian only spared Yun Feng a brief glance before turning his attention back to the matter at hand. Under the guidance of the Yun family attendants, he stepped into the Cloud Tower. The tower was not open to ordinary visitors. Only those of king-level cultivation were permitted inside. Yun Feng saw Ye Tian. As Ye Tian walked into the Cloud Tower, Yun Feng grabbed a nearby servant and demanded, Who was that just now? I thought I saw the sect master. How did he get into the Cloud Tower? The servant, recognizing young Master Yun Feng, who had risen in prominence recently, bowed quickly and said, Young Master Yun Feng, that was the invincible Grandmaster Ye Tian. It's him, Yun Feng exclaimed. The news that Ye Tian had slain a king beast had already spread across the Demon Sea Grand Base. Yun Feng had heard it long ago. He felt no fear, only a burning desire to grow stronger and to fight. He was convinced that once he reached the peak of the Sectmaster realm, he too could slay a king beast. I'll go back to cultivate, he said inwardly. I must become stronger. Ye Tian continued up into the Cloud Tower and reached the 10th floor. The moment he stepped into the main hall, a dozen pairs of eyes swept over him. He glanced around. The cultivators gathered there were clearly marked by their levels. Almost all were king-rank practitioners. Ye Tian stood apart. He was the only Grandmaster present, and the difference was obvious. Chapter 118. I've seen you. Ye Tian raised his fist in greeting. Yun Mengli glanced over, gave a slight nod, and said, Brother Ye, please take a seat. Ye Tian nodded and slipped into a chair at the back. The other king-level cultivators paid him little mind. After all, Ye Tian was technically only a master. Though his combat ability rivaled king-level strength, it was on the weaker end, and the true power of the veteran kings was something he could not yet imagine. Until he fully matured, they had no reason to treat him as a threat. One by one, the kings filed in until nearly 60 of them had filled the hall. Ye Tian said nothing, but watched them closely, mentally assessing their cultivation. Most of the attendees were extraordinary level talents. Only Yu Ling and a handful of others already counted as top-level king talents, likely elevated more by fortunate opportunity than overwhelming natural advantage. As for anyone with the Morningstar cultivation talent, there was none. That did not surprise Ye Tian. If even one of them had the Morningstar talent, they might have already smashed through the king-level bottleneck and advanced to the next realm. In the past half hour, the number of king-level fighters had climbed to 73. The Demon Sea Grand Base could now be said to have essentially restored its king ranks. It should have been higher. The recent Great War had cost the base many of its king-level men and women, so the total sat at only 73. Without counting Ye Tian, it was 72. Once everyone had taken their places, Yun Mengli stood and addressed the assembly. This meeting is to discuss the spatial rift 30,000 kilometers out, she said. Although our 3 major bases have pushed back the bestial tide and slain 3 invincible king beasts, those losses mean nothing to the feral hosts. The beast's foundation is ancient and vast. By nature, they far outmatch us. Humanity has only come into its current strength for a little over 100 years. Without measures like the suppression of the world, the true, terrible might of the beasts would already have poured down on Earth and wiped us out. The gathered king-level fighters all nodded in agreement with Yun Mengli's words. Humans really are too weak, and Yun Mengyuan said. The more we learn about the feral beasts, the more we're shocked by how powerful they are. The gap between us and them is enormous. She continued, if we don't seal that spatial rift, the beasts will keep sending through invincible king-class monsters, and the beast tide will erupt again. I've spoken with the invincible kings of the other 2 major bases. The 3 bases will join forces to seal the rift. Seal the rift? Can that actually be done? One of the kings asked. Yes, Yunmeng Yuan nodded. The super base has developed a top-tier formation, a supreme array, that can block the void and suppress spatial rifts. But it only works on rifts up to 3 stars. It's useless against anything above that. Recon shows the rift 60,000 kilometers away is a 3-star rift at most. That means it can only allow invincible king beasts through, and only a few, at most 2 or 3. If any more come through than that, our 3 bases simply won't be able to hold the tide. Many of the kings stared in disbelief. The super base actually developed a formation that can suppress a 3-star rift? They murmured, stunned. Ye Tian listened, slightly puzzled, and kept silent. Still, from the other king's conversation, he quickly picked up how space cracks were classified. They were ranked by size and by the pressure of the space within them. The rank determined whether powerful beings could pass through to other star systems. The cracks that had appeared in the last secret realm were non-transitable, 0-star cracks. At best, those 0-star rifts connected only to the secret realm itself. They could not open into the beast world. Above them were the 1, 2, and 3-star cracks. 4 and 5-star cracks were almost beyond a king's imagination. Only a super base would have the power to suppress something of that magnitude. When the phenomenon first emerged a century ago, most cracks had been only 1 star. Otherwise, humanity would have been wiped out long ago. The cracks also tended to escalate slowly over time, gradually growing from 1 star to 2 or 3 star, and sometimes even toward 4. That was why most of the higher star rifts they knew of were still slowly evolving. If that spatial fissure, 60,000 kilometers away, is allowed to keep widening until it becomes a 4-star rift, we'll have a flood of invincible king beasts pouring out, perhaps things even beyond king beast level. When that happens, the Demon Sea Grand Base will be overwhelmed and wiped off the map. We have to suppress the fissure and reinforce the seal now. Your Majesty, an aide replied, it isn't so simple. A formation capable of holding back a 3-star spatial fissure has to be a top-tier array, one of the highest-level formations there is. You can't improvise something like that on the fly. It also requires an expert array mage to lay it down, and the formation masters at our Demon Sea Grand Base aren't skilled enough for this kind of work. A question rose on the king's lips. Then what do we do? Worth the price, Yunmeng conceded. A formation strong enough to suppress a 3-star space rift isn't something you can throw together. Even with the blueprints and materials, our Demon Sea Grand Base alone doesn't have a top-level formation master capable of erecting it. But the 3 major bases together have 4 top formation masters, 50 advanced formation masters, hundreds of mid-level formation masters, and thousands of low-level formation masters. Combined, they can lay out a formation like that. Consolidate all the formation mages, divide the work, and cooperate, someone said. That actually makes building a supreme array feasible. The kings nodded in agreement. Yunmeng Yuan's tone grew grave. Don't be naive. The ferocious beasts won't let us assemble the array unopposed. They'll attack. Our job is to hold them off so the mages can work without interruption. Your Majesty, rest assured, another leader said firmly. I'll drive the beasts back to the mouth of the rift, leave them no chance to sabotage the array. One by one, the other kings voiced the same resolve. Good. Yunmeng nodded in satisfaction to the assembled kings and announced, in 6 days we'll have basically gathered all the materials needed to set up the supreme array. Once that's done, we'll move straight to the spatial rift. If we delay, the situation could change. The beast faction might send 3 more invincible king beasts, and then we'll be in real trouble. This time, the invincible king beast they sent wasn't that powerful, probably just bait, Yunmeng continued. Next time they might send a truly terrifying one, a heaven-defying invincible king beast. That kind of creature is beyond my ability to handle. At the mention of a heaven-defying invincible king beast, a flicker of surprise crossed Yunmeng's face. Ye Tian and several other kings noticed it immediately. It was obvious Yunmeng had met such a beast before, likely during the conflict around the super base. The meeting adjourned, and the kings dispersed. Ye Tian returned to his residence and used the coming days to cultivate. He wasn't in any hurry to use his remaining copy opportunity. he decided to wait the 6 days and see how things developed. I don't see the chapter text, only the single line. In a flash, 6 days passed. Please paste the full chapter you want revised, and I'll rewrite it into clear, idiomatic English while keeping all characters, plot points, and details intact. If helpful, here are a few polished alternatives to that sentence while you paste the rest. In the blink of an eye, 6 days had gone by. 6 days passed in a flash. Before anyone realized it, 6 days were gone. 6 days slipped away like a sigh. When you send the chapter, please tell me any names term you definitely want preserved as is, transliterations, ship names, etc. Whether you prefer American or British spelling. Any content warnings, explicit, violent, etc., so I can handle style appropriately. Whether you want light editing, mostly grammar flow, or a more polished rewrite, smoother prose, tightened pacing. Paste the chapter whenever you're ready, and I'll get started. Chapter 119. After the battle, Ye Tian tested himself and felt a rush of satisfaction. His combat power had jumped dramatically. His physical strength had reached the equivalent of 16 elephants. That kind of gain was terrifying. Most masters, even after breaking through to the early master level at about 1.5 elephant strength, would take years, sometimes even decades, to approach 16 elephants. Only those with extraordinary talent might do it in a year. Ye Tian, however, had truly cultivated in the Sectmaster realm for less than 2 months. To achieve that kind of improvement in such a short time was nothing short of astounding. A chime sounded from his communicator. Ye Tian glanced at the message and saw Yunmeng's notice. It was time to depart. For this mission, he would go as part of a king-level combat unit, not as a formation mage. He was only an intermediate formation mage, and his experience and reserves were far less than those of the other mid-level array practitioners. There would be few formations at the gathering, and he wouldn't be able to contribute meaningfully to the top-level arrays anyway. His strength would be best used on the front line as a king-level fighter, standing against the fierce beasts. Little blood, let's go together. Ye Xiaoyou hesitated for only a moment. He didn't want to display his flying talent. Showing too much would only draw attention, so he planned to escort Xiao Blood to the space rift himself. He wasn't worried about the beast being recognized. In his opinion, the Shi Sun-grade dragon bloodline talent that Xiao Blood displayed was far beyond anything the Yunmeng kings could identify. They wouldn't know what it was. Besides, if he let fear of discovery stop him now, he'd never be able to take Xiao Blood out in public again. The two of them flew to the eastern edge of the Demon Sea base. Outside the compound, king-level figures hovered in the air, one after another. Ye Xiaoyou rose up as well, carrying Xiao Blood with him. Ye Xiaoyou? Someone called from above. A figure descended. It was Yue Ling. Big brother Yue? Ye Xiaoyou returned the greeting, clasping his fist respectfully. Yue Ling's eyes fell to Xiao Blood and he tensed, surprised. Ye Xiaoyou, your beast is extraordinary. I can't tell exactly what it is at first glance, but it resembles the legendary dragon. Could it be a dragon beast? Xiao Blood gave a few disgruntled hums, insulted at Yue Ling, calling him a low-blooded dragon beast. Ye Tian reached out, stroked the creature's head to calm it, then turned to Yue Ling. Xiao Blood is a dragon beast, and it's pretty strong, he said. Yue Ling smiled. I thought Ye Xiaoyou couldn't fly, and I was going to take you with me, but it looks like that won't be necessary. They chatted for a while. Then Ye Tian took the opportunity to ask the king-level Yue Ling the question that had been on his mind. Brother Yue, do you know anything about the super base? When Yue Ling heard the name, the super base, her expression hardened. The super base is very mysterious, she said. I hear it's hidden deep inside China. Our Demon Sea stronghold used to sit on the East China Sea coast, but the land has shifted and pushed us farther inland. The super base isn't just bigger in population, their strength is a whole level above ours. I don't know the exact details, I've never been inside, but I heard the Dream Departure King say that even an Invincible King wouldn't be ranked there. The Invincible King wouldn't be ranked? Ye Tian blurted, stunned. Only now did the true scale of the super base hit him. His longing to get there grew. Only at the super base could he study and copy truly advanced cultivation techniques. If he could train there, reaching king rank wouldn't be long. Yunmeng waved a broad hand and said, "Let's go." A long, helpless sigh escaped Ye Tian. A renowned king-rank cultivator tore through the void and sped toward the space rift, moving at a pace far faster than the royal wind boat. 60,000 kilometers sounded like a long way. Before long, the kings arrived at the crack in space. Inside the rift, countless fierce beasts had gathered. Many were king-class, though there were no invincible overlords among them. Yunmeng Yuan did not immediately order the beasts cleared. "Hold," he said. "Wait for the other 2 base contingents to arrive." About 10 minutes later, 2 more king-rank figures appeared, each accompanied by formation mages. Voices called their arrivals, "Qinghe Great Base," "Shenhang Great Base." Both bases were comparable in strength to the Demon Sea base, though they had smaller populations. The 2 kings approached and greeted Yunmeng Yuan. From Yueling's explanation, Ye Tian learned their names: Li Qing, the Qing King of the Qinghe Great Base, and Blood King Zhao of the Shenhang Great Base. Among them stood 3 invincible kings, the Blood King, Yunmengli, and the Green King, rulers who had endured since the disaster 100 years ago. "Dream King, are the materials ready?" the Blood King asked. "They're ready," Yunmengli replied. "More than enough. Don't worry about supplies. Then let's begin," the Green King said. At his order, the mages broke apart and spread out. Over a radius of thousands of miles, they began to lay down the main array, weaving it into a lattice that would surround and seal the spatial rift. Other king-class fighters took up positions to protect the mages. Ye Tian himself stood watch over a group of junior mages. The 3 invincible kings moved toward the rift, weapons and power flaring as they hunted the king beasts pouring from the tier in space. A roar filled the air. From the mouth of the rift came wave after wave of king beasts and top-tier monsters, as if they sensed the human plan and were racing to stop it. The clash was immediate and brutal. "Lord Ye Tian, trouble!" a dozen junior mages shouted, their hands already gathering energy and their faces tight with alarm. Ye Tian gave a slight nod and left the novice mages under Xiaoblood's protection. Their role wasn't crucial, but they were part of the front line and couldn't be neglected. A thunderous roar split the air. Ye Tian gripped his high-level Yuanli sword and began to sweep it in wide, practiced arcs. A top-tier ferocious beast charged straight at him and was cut down under his blade. Meanwhile, ever shameless, Xiaoblood took advantage of the chaos to scavenge the beast's blood, stuffing it into its storage pouch with an almost proud little flourish. No waste, it seemed to think. But the waves of top-tier beasts kept coming, pouring forward so relentlessly that even Ye Tian felt the pressure mount. Then a voice, deep and authoritative, called out, "Ye Xiaoyo, a king-rank beast is heading your way. Hold it off. Once I finish this one, I'll come help you." Ye Tian recognized the tone. The speaker was a king-rank cultivator, someone with considerable power. The ground shuddered as something enormous approached. A 100-meter-long crocodile heaved itself into view, its savagery radiating from every scale. The dozen junior mages nearby went pale and trembled. The beast's presence had left them visibly shaken. "Don't get distracted. Keep the formation tight," Ye Tian ordered. One by one, the mages recentered their minds and resumed weaving the formation. He was about to call Little Blood back. The creature was furiously absorbing the beast's blood. It had been growing at an alarming rate and was no longer far behind him. With its talent, it could even hold its own against a king-level opponent. "Little Blood, protect these mages. I'll go take care of that crocodile." Ye Tian sent the command telepathically to Little Blood. Chapter 120. Xiaoblood took Ye Tian's order and flew off to cover the mages who were forming the array. Ye Tian moved forward alone to face the beast, a megalodon crocodile. Bloodline quality, extraordinary. The name even has the character for dragon in it, so I expected a dragon-blooded fiend, Ye Tian said with a smirk. But the bloodline's wasted, no special talent at all. He sounded dismissive, but he didn't underestimate the creature entirely. It was still dangerous enough to merit his attention. They collided with a thunderous impact, and Ye Tian judged the crocodile's strength on the fly. About 3,000 elephant power, he estimated. Compared to him, though, that was weak. Ye Tian's base physical strength was only 16 elephant power, but with his enhancements it multiplied quickly, twofold from his Yuan force, 6-fold from the Qingfeng slash technique, and another 30-fold from his pseudo-mystic level power talent. Altogether, his attack power reached 5,760 elephant power, far outclassing the crocodile. Blow after blow, the megalodon crocodile was driven backward, its hide opening with fresh wounds. With each collision, the beast weakened, the ground trembled beneath their struggle. After a minute, the creature had been shoved back several yards, bleeding and badly battered. Ye Xiaoyo had just finished off the giant, tooth-filled dragon crocodile. No sooner had the beast fallen than a king-level cultivator appeared at his side. "Ye Xiaoyo, you actually killed the megalodon dragon crocodile king!" the man exclaimed. He'd been the one who'd sent the earlier message to Ye Xiaoyo and had expected that the newcomer would be delayed. He never imagined Ye Xiaoyo would be so fierce as to slay a king-level monster outright. When the megalodon had broken through his interception, he'd judged the creature weaker than himself, but hardly easy to dispatch. It would have taken effort even for him. That Ye Xiaoyo had killed it outright proved his strength was at least on par. "Just a stroke of luck," Ye Xiaoyo said modestly. The king-level cultivator shook his head. "Don't be humble. I'll go help hold off the other beasts over there." With that, he moved off. Ye Xiaoyo resumed his post, continuing to guard the area. Little Blood darted forward and began scooping up the giant-toothed dragon crocodile's blood. The crocodile's blood carried a trace of draconic essence, just a hint of dragon blood. But to Little Blood, that made it worth more than 10 times the value of ordinary king beast blood. It chirped and fussed as it worked, greedily collecting every drop. This haul included blood from top-tier ferocious beasts. There weren't many royal-level samples, but Little Blood shamelessly scooped up the blood of numerous king-level beasts, many of them kills left by others. The other kings nearby knew Little Blood belonged to Ye Tian, so they kept their mouths shut. Time slipped by as Ye Tian kept cutting down beast after beast. He had lost count of how many he'd slain when, without warning, a voice suddenly rolled across the wide area, echoing for thousands of miles. 3 voices spoke in perfect unison, the announcements of the 3 invincible kings echoing through the air. "The Great Array is complete. The Array Mage has withdrawn from the Great Array. All king-level beasts have driven the fierce beasts back into the space rift." Ye Tian let out a long, tense breath. Relief washed over him. The coordinated plan of the 3 major bases had worked. At last they could stabilize the space rift. With a thunderous roar, waves of famed king-level beasts surged toward the rift. Their massive forms thundered through the void, each step a promise of annihilation for any hostile creature that tried to escape the collapsing seam in reality. Around Ye Tian, the atmosphere crackled with residual power from the Great Array as the Array Mage fell back to the safe perimeter. The 3 bases held firm. The monstrous invaders had been driven home. For the first time since the rift opened, a fragile calm began to see. TTL. The top formation gradually activated. A force radiating from the underworld's seal filled the void, locking it down and trapping wave after wave of ferocious beasts inside. The lower-tier beasts were rendered almost helpless. Even the strongest of the pack had its power cut by 80%, and the king-class monsters were weakened by roughly half. Under those conditions, the human kings cut through them like a scythe through chaff. No matter how many beasts sprang up, they were slaughtered. Ye Tian and Xiao Blood fought their way forward, pushing steadily toward the spatial rift. Then Ye Tian froze, a surge of elation bubbling up inside him. His copying talent had just awakened and begun scanning nearby powers. A king-level talent flashed across his retina. Human, Li Zhenbai bloodline talent, extraordinary blade talent, advanced, a high-level sword blade talent. Ye Tian thought, his heart pounding. He had been hoping to copy precisely this kind of talent. He had already absorbed 2 high sword talents. If he could copy one more, he could fuse them and promote to the supreme sword talent. He had never met another top-tier sword prodigy inside the Demon Sea Grand Base before. Now, on this king-level mission, he finally had, and it wasn't someone from his own base, but a king-level warrior from one of the other 2 major bases. The 3 bases had been positioned more than 1,000 meters apart, so there had never been a chance to size up the other camp's talents. If he let this pass, he would lose the opportunity forever. Ye Tian didn't hesitate. As the other man's advanced sword technique unfolded, Ye Tian copied it without a second thought. The imitation took, he matched the form and spirit, and immediately went back to cutting down the beasts. It was as if the rift in space had sensed defeat. The stream of savage creatures ceased. The remaining beasts began to retreat, sliding toward the far side of the crack. Soon, a large number of king-level fighters gathered at the rift to finish off whatever was left. Just as they were about to strike the last of the creatures down, something changed. From the far end of the space crack, an incomparably terrifying aura rolled out, spreading like a cold shadow and snuffing the air itself. The pressure of that breath was suffocating. Even cultivators at the king level felt it crush them, their strength all but snuffed out. Only the three invincible kings could barely hold their ground against it. Through the rent in space, Ye Tian saw a pair of eyes. They were golden, like the gaze of a supreme deity, majestic, unconcerned, utterly indifferent. The voice that came with them was cold and implacable. No matter how powerful you claim to be, you will not be allowed to enter our world. Yun Meng snorted coldly. A faint, reverberating sound echoed from the crack, the voice of that supreme being. The kings all stilled. Their first, instinctive shock was disbelief. A beast like that could speak? The golden eyes vanished as abruptly as they had appeared, and a collective breath of relief rippled through the gathered cultivators. No one could deny how terrifying such an existence would be. What level of creature could pierce the fabric of space and come down here? One king whispered, his voice trembling. It must be above typical king-level beings. Not just above, another answered gravely. At least 2 realms beyond the king level. Yun Meng's expression turned solemn. The crowd standing outside the 2 great realms could no longer grasp what kind of existence lay beyond. It was simply too far above them. The top array had been activated. The rift in space did not vanish, but it slowly narrowed. What had once been hundreds of meters tall collapsed down until it was only about 20 meters across, then stopped changing. The top array can only suppress the rift. It can't seal it completely, someone observed. At this size, it should only be a 1-star breach. At worst, it can send through a few high-level ferocious beasts, nothing to be overly worried about. Even so, a handful of king-level fighters and formation mages must be stationed here to guard and stabilize the top array. Who wants to stay? Yun Mengli asked. Ye Tian rose immediately. Your Majesty, he said, I'll remain here for a while. I not only have king-level combat strength, I'm also an intermediate formation mage. I should be of some use. Yun Mengwan studied him for a moment, then nodded with approval. Very well, then you shall stay. The other kings took his words at face value, thinking only that Ye Tian had a strong sense of duty. They had no idea he harbored other plans. He allowed a faint smile to touch his lips as he casually glanced toward the rift in space.